across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome back home of Common Sense. Thank you to Julia. She's back tomorrow right here on Talk. So the cabinet meeting this morning, Keir Starmer blocked rebel ministers from demanding his resignation, instead arguing his case to remain in office. Afterwards, 4 key cabinet supporters, Kyle, McFadden, Kendall and Reid, briefed journalists on camera to confirm that the Prime Minister would in fact stay in office. Happy days all round if you're Keir Starmer. We'll have more details on that. And of course, we are on full alert resignation watch as 83 Labour MPs are putting the pressure on the PM to resign. New figures have revealed that the government borrowing is at its highest since 1998, a 28-year peak. So it would be a fairly, I would say, appropriate time perhaps to walk the plank. We'll have more details on that as well. And amidst all the chaos, Charles III will deliver the... Never heard him called that in my life. Charles III will be... King Charles is going to deliver his speech tomorrow detailing the government's legislative plans. Sir Keir Starmer's utter incompetence is set to intensify scrutiny of the speech as the economy, immigration and the environment are set to make appearances. And then, of course, when all that's done, the whole Mandelson thing comes back to haunt him again. It must be happy days all round. Shay Starmer. Details on all of these stories. Crucially, of course, it's your comments on the way. 0344 499 1000. Well, apparently it's all tickety-boo in Downing Street. Keir Starmer says he will not stand down. Spoiler alert. He will. He's now in the mother of all pincer movements and he will be gone. But here's the thing. When? Not if, but when. Remember, he told us this just yesterday.
I know that people are frustrated by the state of Britain, frustrated by politics, and some people frustrated with me. I know I have my doubters, and I know I need to prove them wrong, and I will.
I have my doubters. Yes, in fact, there's quite a lot of them, as it turns out. 4 senior cabinet ministers, including the Home Secretary and the Foreign Secretary, have had a swift word in his shell-like and told him, the game is up, Governor. We have junior minister resigning this morning, 4 secretaries of state telling him it's over, as I mentioned. Pretty much 100 MPs making it clear they want him gone. Jess Phillips has just resigned from the cabinet. Even Darren Jones, his closest friend and ally, couldn't categorically endorse his chances of survival.
I'm not going to get ahead of any decision that the Prime Minister may or may not take. He was very clear yesterday that he will not be walking away, as some of my colleagues have asked him to do.
But he couldn't go any further than that. Now, Darren Jones is as close and as sycophantic to Keir Starmer as possible. If it was a version of Blackadder, then Darren Jones would be played by David Walliams in a frock. That's the kind of subservient role he's had to the Prime Minister. Even he couldn't come out and say it. He's still there, even though we know it isn't for the long term. If it was a contestant on Gladiators who somehow got to the final, but you know by the time they got to the rope swing, the game was up, then this is Keir Starmer. So the vultures are circling, and as we found out yesterday, Big Ange is back in town.
Our party has suffered historic defeats. Many good Labour colleagues have lost their seats. People who gave everything for their communities that they represented. And it's clear that what we're doing isn't working and it needs to change.
Yeah, unequivocal stuff. But, and here's the curious thing in politics, as Julia was just saying, the first couple of hours of this morning, I thought, well, this is game up. And by the time 2 o'clock, they'll have that podium outside number 10, and Starmer will be ready for the big announcement. He'll announce the roadmap of his resignation. But there is a scintilla of advantage, and this is the problem. No one so far has triggered a leadership election. I mean, it's that simple. People can talk about what was said. The odd character can resign, but nobody has actually fundamentally triggered a leadership election. And until they do, Keir Starmer is going nowhere. The problem is the enemies of Starmer are also divided. And if Streeting were to give it a go, and no one else did, for example, this is very hypothetical, if Streeting gave it a go and it was just him and Starmer on the ticket, I'm telling you now, Starmer would win that. In fact, he'd return emboldened. What his critics are waiting for, of course, seems to be Andy Burnham. And that's where the bear traps lie, possibly to Starmer's advantage. This could take months to get Burnham in situ, during which time Keir Starmer remains in situ. This morning, I thought he couldn't survive the week, but when you crunch the numbers, he arguably could survive the year. That's assuming the Burnham plan comes to fruition. So it's a confused picture. Answer me this as well, and I just want your views on this whole mess, because, you know, there is an overarching thought here, and that is, if you don't like Labour and you want to get rid of them at the next election, remember, this is a leadership election, not a general election, if it came to that. So Labour are going nowhere. What are the greatest chances of the party you support, whether it's the Tories or Reform, the Greens, whoever? What are the greater chances of you winning or at least gaining seats? What person should be in number 10 for that to work to your advantage of the party you like? And the answer is, of course, Keir Starmer. So be careful what you wish for. Oscar Redrop is with us in the studio to discuss this and the other big stories of the day. What is the final nail for Keir Starmer? Let me throw that one out there. 0344 499 1000. Oscar, good to see you in the studio.
Good to see you too.
Oscar is real, we've discovered. We didn't know. We thought there was a bit of an AI thing going on for a couple of months, but real he is, and he's with us, and we're delighted. So, former number 10 advisor, you know what it's like to be at the coalface of hassle and jip.
I'm getting PTSD. This is the final days of Boris, which I was there for, and there are real striking similarities. Yeah. I'd say the difference here, though, is that Keir Starmer is slightly helped by this odd push and pull thing that's going on. The pull, in terms of length of time that it gives him hanging on, is the Andy Burnham effect, and those MPs that are coalescing, and probably, I think it's personally very pie in the sky, but would want him. And then the short jab, which is Wes Streeting. And weirdly, these two forces are coming together and kind of maintaining Starmer for the time being.
Yes.
Wes has got to go now. I mean, and I think in many ways, Starmer's almost calling his bluff on that. You know,
I think he is.
If you're Wes Streeting and you are actually serious about this, you've got to go now.
Do you think, and just give us some insight without, you know, breaching friendships and workplace
There weren't that many there,
NDAs and all that.
I was going to say, by the end.
But you take the point. I mean, is it a case of, you know, the Prime Minister, in the case when you were at Downing Street, Boris Johnson, and a few others, people like yourself, sitting in a room, running through options? What are our options? What do we do? Does the Prime Minister literally say, can I survive this? Even though to the cameras, he will say, I'm going nowhere. Is it that?
They're complete moments of doubt. And just before I really dig into that, you know, you have to mention, and I can't not mention for your viewers and listeners, that whilst this is going on, nobody is governing this country. Yeah. Do you know how terrifying that is? There is no policy being worked on, you know, defence, security. They keep talking about the Labour government, about this dangerous world, and how that means we shouldn't change anything. That's what number 10 is saying. But number 10 are not working on that. They're not doing anything to help and protect us right now. Small boats, nothing's happening there right now. So all the issues of the day are completely thrown in the bin, which is terrifying, I think, and is an abdication of responsibility. That's not particularly personal to this Labour government, because that's kind of what it's like in these moments. Yeah. I mean, I remember... You get a sense of confidence, and I remember we were around this kind of moment, actually. Some people were resigning, but they were pretty low down the food chain. And you get to the end of the day, and it really was the end of the day. It was kind of 7 p.m. or so, and we kind of all look around and we go, I think we've got through another day here. And then Rishi Sunak and Sajid Javid have resigned, and I think, and that's when everything just kind of, you know, zoomed into action, and that's when the holes on the boat were too big, and I think that's what this is going to take. I think, you know, Jess Phillips has just resigned, so we're kind of moving up that food chain a little bit. If people want to read the letter, it is no normal resignation letter. It is brutal. It is cutting, and I think it's going to take that cabinet kind of level maybe to
even if it plateaus, and by the way, I was in Fish Restaurant in Borough Market, just round the corner from here, chowing down on some tasty seafood. when Sajid Javid and Sunak, I remember it coming through. Almost choked on my second oyster. That's how bad it was, Oscar. I was thinking, oh, right, this is the start of something big. And you're right, we're not quite in that league of this at the moment. So Jess Phillips, although it's a ministerial role, not a Secretary of State role, she's quite known. She's a known figure and quite a voice of Labour. And used to do quite a lot round here as well with us. Always very affable. I thought her politics was bonkers, but she was always very nice. So she's gone. Does it stop there, though? Because if it just stops there, there's sort of huge anti-climax where you think, all right, we were expecting more names this afternoon. Nothing. It needs a Javid or a Sunak, doesn't it?
It does. And I remember, again, there was cabinet, I think, on that day or maybe the day before, and everyone kind of smiles and waves and kind of goes, great job, Prime Minister, we're all fully behind you. But that is completely, completely two-faced and just is not the honest representation of the confidence that Boris had at the time. And what we'll be seeing now is, I think Keir Starmer today at Cabinet, I think whoever's working number 10 on the broadcast aspect is doing a decent job of getting people out in front of the cameras, Peter Kyle and the like, kind of voicing that support. But apparently Keir Starmer today, said, like, if you want to talk leadership, come see me after. Wes tried to do exactly that and couldn't find him. He ran away. And I think for listeners and viewers out there, that is quite symbolic of the leadership that we've had with Keir Starmer. It really is.
How would that have been, though, in a cabinet meeting this morning with Wes Streeting sitting there? And, I mean, a couple of others as well. I mean, when we heard that the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, Shabana Mahmood, Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, had a word with Keir Starmer. Now, that could have been a polite word, and they could have said, look, Prime Minister, we're behind you, but others aren't. You need to make a plan. It could have been that. But Wes Streeting is in a different place on this. He wants the job. So, I mean, how does that... Are they looking each other in the eye? Morning, Wes? Or morning, Prime Minister? Is there any of that going on?
I mean, I think, again, politicians, and this won't be a shock to viewers and listeners, they are some of the most duplicitous and capable of acting and smiling and doing something down your back and telling you it's raining. That is an art form to a lot of these guys. So the confidence you get as a Prime Minister, from those, how are we doing today, Prime Minister? Yeah, I'm really cracking on my brief. It is, at moments like this, it means nothing. The best thing you can do is get them on the record in front of a camera voicing their support. But even then, that kind of confidence you get at number 10 by someone going on the record, a big name going on the record voicing their support, it lasts about 10 minutes, often. And I remember that thing of, like, because obviously, in that process where you want people to go out there and back you, you literally can't get hold of them. There's no... their special advisors turn their phones off. There's no chance of reaching, someone like Wes at this moment in time. But in fairness to Wes, if that cabinet today, Keir Starmer said, if you want to talk leadership, come find me after cabinet, and Wes has tried to do so, and Keir Starmer's run into a cupboard somewhere. I honestly, just zooming out a little bit rather than the mechanics of it. Keir Starmer, there's the thing going around now where if you drag it out too long that the public may start to feel sorry for Keir Starmer. That kind of how it kind of changes a bit.
Yes.
Like all these kind of backstabbers are out to get him. If that's part of the number 10 strategy, I think they have underestimated the dislike that is out there for him in the country.
Were you there when there was when Boris conceded that I can't go on?
Well, that was overnight, but yeah, I was very much working at number 10 at the time. I think the difference with Boris, and people might watch this and go, oh, he's just as bad, and fair play, depending on your politics. I would understand that rationale, but Boris could at that point bang his hand on the desk and say, you can't get rid of me now. I'm leading from the front on Ukraine. I rolled out the fastest vaccine rollout in the world. I got Brexit done. Let me, levelling up. And people will scoff at that, but that was a proper political idea and agenda. What can Keir Starmer And he tried to via that speech yesterday, which I thought was shocking. I thought that was, you know, if it was a last minute, you know, the ball's gone in the box and you need to pull out a, you know, a last minute winning goal, he's put that in row Z. It was shocking. So what can Keir Starmer bang his hand on the desk and tell these cabinet ministers and the country, don't get rid of me now because I'm doing this? There's nothing. There's literally nothing there.
Do you know what he's doing this afternoon? Keir Starmer's gone to an owl sanctuary.
That's literally a scene in Alan Partridge,
visiting an owl sanctuary, apparently.
Right. Yeah. Well, the things we seek comfort in during difficult times, I guess.
That's become the kind of ex-rumour.
Wow.
That's what he's going to do.
It's kind of fitting. It kind of works. I get it.
Do you think then, just to go back to this roadmap? I mean, if only Streeting challenged him, and that's unlikely that if Streeting put his hat in the ring, as the phrase goes, then others will do so. But of course, this precludes Andy Burnham because he's not an MP. So if it was just Starmer and Streeting, Starmer could win that.
He could win that. I think the thing that's really underpriced in this, and look, there'll be people you could get on your show who know the Labour Party mechanics better than me, but the Andy Burnham thing feels a bit pie in the sky to me. And so I think if the reality of that really sets in terms of like actually the things that we need to achieve to get Andy Burnham in a position to challenge, I think Ed Miliband is really underpriced. I think he's a similar kind of senior head that in that soft left, the Labour Party, that people could coalesce around. I really do. And I know he's saying, I don't want it, I've got nothing to do with any of this, you know, leave me out of it. But, you know, if he was leader of that party...
He'd love the job.
If there was the support for him there, I could see Ed Miliband. And for your listeners, you know, I think that's quite scary. I think he seems like a nice guy, don't get me wrong, like genuinely. It doesn't seem like a bad guy. But I think there are policies there on that soft left that would be incredibly dangerous for this country.
Yeah, it's always annoying, isn't it? And you must have found this in politics. I certainly found it when I was in the press gallery that, you know, when you were growing up, and if you had an interest in politics in your kind of teen years, and you find yourself in this place called Parliament, you see all these characters, you know, you think, I mean, even the odd elder in the House of Lords that was in Thatcher's, I remember being in the lift with Geoffrey Howe once and thinking, this is insane. I mean, Geoffrey Howe, and he still looked like Geoffrey Howe, you know, even though he was a lot older. He was wearing a pair of slippers, which I thought was interesting, but
comfort.
Hey, it's comfy cosy. But I always found that all the politicians you thought you weren't going to like were actually all right, and the ones you thought might be all right were, you know, not necessarily the ones you want to trust. So there was a bit of that going on. So I've never been under any illusions that, you know, I'm sure Ed Miliband, if he had a pint with him, in fact, he'd probably be quite funny with having a pint with. But as a politician, he's a horror show.
Yeah, he is, and I think your listeners would be really, viewers would be really, really concerned, particularly around stuff like energy policy and net zero during the times that we're in now. I mean, that just seems like complete madness. And that when you talk about, like, you know, he seems like a decent bloke.
Yeah.
There's a real confusion with Starmer, I think, because I think a lot of people, including Keir Starmer, would look in the mirror and go, why do people dislike me so much? I don't really get it. Like, he's someone who genuinely, by all accounts, like, you know, loves going to the football, genuinely likes his football, like loves a pint. He seems like a pretty normal guy. So he'll be looking in the mirror going, why does everyone hate me? But I think there's a real true reason for that, and I think that's because he is a vacuum and he is devoid of anything. And I think this country right now feels like it's in the mud, and they need a hand of inspiration, imagination, charisma and ideas, and he has none of that. And just finally on that, because Boris's character was called into question a lot, and depending on your politics again, and I kind of get that. You know, he's not cookie cutter. He is pretty Marmite in many ways. Yeah. And people didn't like how he, you know, run shot of things as well. And I also understand. But Keir Starmer, if you look at the moral kind of code of him, this decent guy, right, has chucked every single person possible under the bus during his time as Prime Minister when he has made the mistakes. Yes. And that, I think the country see that. I think they see someone who, if we read the stories today about running away basically from Wes Streeting after Cabinet, and the sackings he's made around decisions that he has stood in front of, I think that's what the country see.
There's been a lot of plank walking, hasn't there?
Yeah.
Under his, or pushing from Starmer, of people that, oh, you're slightly in the way, off you go. There wasn't a lot of loyalty shown. Now, we are hearing there has been a resignation, another resignation. Larry the cat, apparently, has...
Not Larry, no.
Don in Chelmsford says, serious news coming out of Downing Street. Larry the cat's litter tray has been seen being removed, fueling rumours that Larry has now lost confidence in Starmer.
Wow.
And of course, never his cat, was it?
No, Larry's been... I remember, people will think this is a bit of a red flag maybe, but I'm very much a cat over dogs person.
Oh, yeah.
And so, which is a bit controversial.
Bit weird, Oscar, but I'm not going to judge you on it.
I know. But I remember when I first met Larry, and I was starstruck, and then I had to do this odd thing where I remember, like, oh, he's a cat, so he's not aware he's famous. Yes. So I probably don't need to be quite so, you know, kind of nervous around him.
Well, I mean, the only common denominator in all of these comings and goings is Larry the cat, so don't let him off the hook too much.
Well, he might chuck his name in at this rate.
We are hearing the chief political correspondent of The Times, Aubrey Allegretti, has said there is more to follow. A minister texts, "We're all going." So we will see how that pans out in the next few hours. Oscar's with us, more calls, comments, and of course stories coming through. 0344 499 1000.
When you get the offer to be the voice of a sheep...
Yes, you can only dream, really.
Kelly Riley and Cole Hauser! Well, how much of rip does your husband in real life have about him?
I mean, yeah. I mean, he's mad.
Say
He's dude.
Kirsty and Phil!
Can we talk about one other thing?
We can talk about loads of things. It's an interview.
Wake up, it's a beautiful morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Paul says, imagine those parents who named their son Kia. What if anybody did, Oscar?
I highly doubt that.
Yeah. I mean, there were lots of kids in, where was it, that were named Tony after Tony Blair in Kosovo, I think.
Yeah.
So there's a disproportionate amount of...
And Boris in Ukraine.
Boris in Ukraine. A lot of
Had
Boris.
to get that in.
Well, indeed. I mean, a lot of Borises out there. We continue, of course, talking about the curious goings-on in Downing Street. Lots of rumours. In fact, I think there are more than rumours. There'll be more ministers that will be resigning. But it does, as we said at the beginning, it takes the big one, doesn't it? It takes a Home Secretary or a chancellor or whatever to go. Once that happens, we're in a completely different place.
For sure. And I think we're building to that point. And I remember, Boris obviously said when the herd moves, that the herd moves.
Yeah.
But I think the Labour Party, they work differently. I don't think it's quite the same. I think we are seeing that herd move, but it's happening because they're very confused about the way forward, I think. It is happening more incrementally.
Sure. Let's move to this story. Zach Polanski. He's another gift that keeps on giving, isn't he, in a curious way. I genuinely, I find it unfathomable that somebody like Keir Starmer has a kind of... I don't know if he does have a die-hard following, even when like Boris did have a big following of people that thought he was the man. And if you criticised him, it was like you were criticising their own mother. It was that kind of thing. I don't think Keir has that. Polanski, however, has somehow managed to enamour groups of people. Maybe they're all off their face students. I don't know. And they keep talking about, he's sort of the left equivalent of Nigel Farage. And I trying to be objective, I can't see it for love nor money. However, we know Zach yesterday, he was caught lying on his CV by saying he worked for the Ministry of Justice when he actually appeared in a training video as a kind of bit part actor, in some kind of justice thing. Today we discover he's not been paying his council tax. And of all the pieces of information that I've been least surprised by, I only found this out today, but it didn't surprise me one bit, is that Zach Polanski lives on a houseboat. Of course he does. Of course he does.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
And I bet he's got, he's probably got a hamster and,
or a cat. Going back.
Might have a cat. He definitely, he could have a cat. Ferret, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, it's been reported to City Hall Standards Committee after admitting to failing to pay council tax on a houseboat, despite previously insisting it was not his main residence, even though he lives there all the time.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a pattern emerging for Zach Polanski. If I'm really objective and I take a seat back and we kind of work out why he is gaining momentum and there is an element of popularity there, his kind of online, the way he engaged with people online is light years ahead, actually, of a lot of politicians. How that honestly translates on the ground, I'm not so sure. And actually, I think those locals weren't actually that brilliant for the Green Party. I think they'd be a bit disappointed with actually how that did translate. But there is a pattern emerging here. I personally feel like I just see a nerd, if I'm honest, when I look at Zach Polanski. But I get there's an element of charisma there, maybe, if that's your thing. But there is a pattern emerging where you look through his CV and he's... When you say lying is a huge allegation in politics, which is kind of ironic because it feels like it happens all the time.
It does.
But it is a big allegation. But he is definitely, and actually I quite liked some of his explanations for stuff, which was like, look, I'm a human being, I am fallible, and you kind of go, oh, not a lot of politicians admit that. All right, fair play. But there's a pattern now.
Well, yeah, and
there's a pattern. This is happening constantly with his background.
You can't. It can't be a mistake when you say, I work at the Ministry of Justice. You can't...
No, exactly.
Somebody saying, I work at Buckingham Palace. You can't then go, oh, do you know what? It was only years later I remembered I didn't. That's not a thing, is it? It's not possible. And this fella, Polanski, so he did that with the Ministry of Justice. And today we've got this thing about his... the boat that he lives on. He spent days claiming he only stayed on the boat occasionally, which he now concedes is untrue. Well, it's a lie, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't say, if that's your main place you sleep, on a boat...
that's it, right?
That's it, right? There's nothing, it's unequivocal. There's nothing sketchy about that.
I think people who support Zach Polanski won't care. What they would say, and again, just being really objective, I personally see it as very different things, but what his supporters would say was it's exactly the same for people who support Farage, right? Like they price in that this guy is going to have skeletons and isn't going to always play by the rules, if you like. But the difference for me, and this is a really big difference, is I think that there is an element of Zach's politics and the Green Party kind of movement, which is there is momentum building there. They could have a say on election day for the shape of this country.
I know.
So it's not just like a bit of fun. There's a danger to his
There's
politics.
now serious implications.
And I actually, just really quickly on that, I think before the locals, the reason why they didn't quite do as well as I think they were hoping was that kind of element of anti-Semitism that is growing in that Green Party and how he came out, the tweet he put out ahead of the stabbing in Golders Green, the attack in Golders Green around the police. I think voters saw that.
Yeah.
And I think even that last minute, they kind of went, actually,
yeah.
I'm not comfortable with this lot.
I think you're right. Just finally, very quick story. The Met Police have lowered the illegal threshold for banning the pro-Palestinian Nakba Day March. Or Tommy Robinson's Unite the Kingdom March has not been met. Terror legislation reviewer Jonathan Hall said the pro-Palestinian marches inevitably incubate anti-Semitic language, calling for a temporary moratorium. The Met has only sought a march ban twice in 14 years, including blocking one, the Al-Quds March, the Iran-linked Al-Quds March in March, the March in March, as it were. But they're not banning the other ones. I think both the Unite the Kingdom March should be banned this weekend, and I think the other one should be banned. And you know why? Because I'm going to the Cup final on Saturday, and it's going to be a right old mess.
I love that.
It's going to be a right mess getting across the capital.
Can't you helicopter in? Surely you've got like a budget for that.
Normally the Wembley boys find a chopper and in I go, but on this occasion, no, I'm tubing it all the way with my little boy.
Yeah,
and it would cost enough flipping money to go there, I can tell you that much. So it's going to be not an unimpeded journey, I would imagine.
No, but it's a special day for you. That's very nice you get to do that with your lad.
It is a special day.
On the marches, though, very, very quickly, I almost think, and maybe this is defeatist of me, I think particularly with the kind of the anti-Semitism that we've seen on marches, I almost think it's too late to start banning them, because that since October the 7th, up and down, that, not all, I get that, but that element of hatred and anti-Semitism and Jewish hatred that has grown as a result of those marches in this country and has resulted in synagogues being burnt, Jews being murdered, attacked, stabbed. That genie is unfortunately out the bottle now.
It's a good and a profound point to finish on. Oscar, great to see you as well. We'll see you again soon. Oscar Redrop with us, yes, on the programme. Thank you to him. Over to you shortly. We are going to speak to Fraser Myers as well from Spiked. Also, Matt Bishop, Labour MP, will join us. Where does he stand? He's in the thick of it as a backbencher of the Labour Party. We'll get to him in a couple of moments as well. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is 25 to 2. Let's get a word with Fraser Myers from Spiked. Fraser, good afternoon to you. I mean, it's days like this that, of course, get you out the bed in the morning, right? I know you've written a whole piece on Starmer. He's hanging on, though, right? I mean, I don't know how long he can hang on for, because there is a sort of fairly predicted chronology to these things. You know, you say you're hanging on, you say you're going nowhere, and then half an hour later, you're off, you've gone. Is that how this is going to pan out? I guess the question is, what's the time frame?
Yeah, I think it is a question of when, not if. But he really is digging in, isn't he? Yeah. I mean, how many messages does he need to be sent? We had the local elections with the public roundly rejecting the Labour Party, the Labour government suffering the worst defeat for an incumbent government since John Major's Tories in 1995. We all know what happened 2 years later to them. We've had, I think by my count, just before I came on air, 84 MPs calling for Starmer to resign, a significant chunk of the Parliamentary Labour Party. And now we've had some ministers resign, a heavy hitter in the form of Jess Phillips. I think it will take perhaps a Home Secretary, a Chancellor, someone of that stature to actually resign, to fully make him realise that the game is up. Because we have had the Home Secretary tell him that he should go, that it's time to go, but she hasn't put her money where her mouth is and actually, taken the plunge. But he does seem to be clinging on. I think he's going to, his fingers are going to have to be peeled from the doors. He's dug in. He's barricaded it. He's padlocked the door. He's put the chairs and tables in front of it to keep people out. He is so politically clueless as to not realise that the game is up. Any longer he can only drag this on. It can only become more embarrassing for him, I think, and more humiliating. He should just go sooner rather than later, I think.
It's kind of strange because you look at it from various angles. Okay, I won't say he seems to have survived, because the story is still being played out. So, but as we sit here right now, he's still the Prime Minister. If you have 100 MPs who want you to go, if you've just been obliterated at the local elections, including losing control of Wales for the first time in history, if you have senior cabinet members, including Foreign Secretary, Home Secretary, whispering to you, albeit politely, look, Prime Minister, you might have to look for a roadmap out of this. If you have ministers resigning, I mean, surely that's it, isn't it? That's the dictionary definition of telling a Prime Minister it's time to go.
Yes, and you do wonder what does he want to stay on to do? It's not as if he has particularly great achievements to his name. It's not as if he has a programme that needs to be carried out. It seems as if his purpose at the moment is merely staying on in power, extending his stay of execution. You saw yesterday when he was supposed to deliver this great make or break speech, where he was fighting for his political life. And he delivered the punches with the force, I think, of an 8-year-old schoolgirl. Everything was recycled. The speech was wooden. He had no passion whatsoever. He couldn't convince anyone that he really wanted or needed to stay in this job. And yet, bizarrely today, he's dug in. And, there are reports coming out from Cabinet that he just point blank refused to discuss his future at the Cabinet meeting, and then said, well, if you want to discuss whether I should be Prime Minister, we can meet individually. And then he refused to meet people individually, so they couldn't discuss his future afterwards. It beggars belief. I think, what has he got to offer beyond simply staying on? I mean, the bizarre thing, I suppose, is that we have the King's speech tomorrow, where he's going to lay out his legislative agenda for the next year, which I can't see him lasting the year. He gave an interview to The Observer at the weekend, said he was going to be Prime Minister till the end of the decade. I mean, he must be deluded to think that. The writing has been on the wall ever since, really, the Peter Mandelson scandal, and then his fate must have been sealed by the local election.
Indeed, and of course the Mandelson thing is going to come back after the King's speech, because we've got the whole Met Police drop of info and conversation, so that's going to be quite telling, one would assume. If we were sitting in the Old Bailey at the moment, Fraser, and I was Keir Starmer's defence barrister, I'd be looking at the jury and I'd be going, well, you've got a couple of cabinet people have resigned, you've got 80 backbenchers, you've got 300 backbenchers that want him to stay, you've got the rest of the cabinet that want him to stay. On balance, most Labour supporters, MPs, publicly at least, want him to stay. That would be the defence position.
Well, publicly, yes, but we could see how we could see how quickly that changes, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who there are a lot of MPs, I imagine, who are loyal to Starmer, who came into Parliament, who are new. Perhaps they're reluctant to stick the knife in, but it is still already, 84. Okay, it's not a majority, but that's a very large contingent of MPs calling for you to go publicly. I'd be very surprised if that doesn't go to over 100. And these are the people in your own party. These are the people most loyal to you. Think about the general public. Think about what do they think. There's no chance of Starmer, leading Labour into the next election. Or if there is, I mean, is he going to drag the whole party down with him to absolute oblivion? He has the lowest approval ratings of any PM in history. He clearly has no plans for turning things around. So I think, he's just not getting the message, I think. Someone described when Ian Duncan Smith refused to resign when he was in similar trouble. He was, of course, never Prime Minister, but he was leader of the opposition, going nowhere. Someone politely described it as him having mural difficulties, not seeing the writing on the wall. And I think that's where Keir Starmer is right now.
I guess one of the difficulties for those that aren't supporters of Keir Starmer, and certainly other political parties, whether you're the Greens or Reform or the Conservatives, is that in a curious way, it's all very well agitating and people grabbing the popcorn and enjoying the spectacle of a Labour Prime Minister, the opposition having these horrendous difficulties and wading through treacle and attempting to avoid walking the plank, etc. However, of course, in many respects, it would suit them more that he stayed there. So it does kind of divide people's instinctive opinions on this stuff.
Yes, I can see an argument for wanting him to be kept in if you're, if you're leading Reform or the Greens. But I do think, if we look at some of the people who are being touted as his potential replacements, I'm not convinced that they're really in a position to turn things around massively. Perhaps the likes of Andy Burnham may get a boost from being personally more likeable, but really he has a kind of similar policy programme to Starmer, maybe slightly more to the left, perhaps could win back some Green voters, but I think would likely alienate more people who are going towards Reform. And actually that's where the public is going. It may be that the Labour Party values the votes of people who are switching to the Greens.
True.
But the working classes, certainly in this country, are going completely the other way. Angela Rayner certainly doesn't have a prospectus for those people. Ed Miliband, heaven forbid, certainly doesn't have a prospectus for those people. So, yes, I could see perhaps a boost in the polls for Labour if they change leader, but I don't think it's going to change the fundamentals on the ground.
I think you're right. Fraser, great to have you on again. Thank you, Fraser Myers, Deputy Editor of Spiked Online. Let's speak with Matt Bishop, MP, Labour MP for Forest of Dean. Nice to have you with us, Matt. A real Labour MP, alive and well and joining us on the programme. I mean, it's obviously troubled times. Just give us a sense then, because I genuinely don't know where you sit in this picture as a backbench MP. Are you Team Keir or Team someone else?
I'm 100% team someone else, Ian. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure.
I went public and said my statement yesterday. When you mentioned earlier with Fraser, the Mandelson situation and the Mandelson saga, I went public then, one of the first backbench MPs, to say that if things didn't change and we didn't have that transparency, the Prime Minister had to consider his position. The locals sent some clear messages. I spent all day yesterday speaking to victims, constituents, victims against from crimes against violence against women and girls. The message was consistent. The Prime Minister doesn't seem to get what needs to happen and change. I think he's a decent guy on a personal level. He's a nice guy, but he's not getting the message, and therefore he's had to go. And when I see colleagues and friends like Alex Davis-Jones, the Minister for Victims, resigning just now, announced, it's shocking.
Yeah, Jess Phillips as well, gone almost in the same breath. And the smart money says, Matt, that there will be more to follow as we sit here at 1:45. By the 6 o'clock news this evening, there might be half a dozen more names.
I wouldn't bet against that, Ian. I don't know. I'm not. Can't speak for any of my colleagues, but I wouldn't bet against that.
What do you? What has to happen here then? Because even if I was a supporter of Keir Starmer, but I was sitting in his office, and we just had Oscar Redrop with us here on the programme, who was sitting in the office with Boris Johnson when this all literally almost replication of what happened to him when you've got people around saying, look, you know, they're circling, you've got to go. And yet you don't move. I mean, what has to happen when there are nearly 100 Labour MPs who think like you do, Matt? There's cabinet ministers. We understand even the Foreign Secretary and the Home Secretary, albeit politely, sort of advised Keir Starmer, look, you can't really hang on anymore. But he's still there. So it makes you wonder what the heck has to happen.
The Prime Minister said in his statement, and as cabinet ministers have said, he does command the leadership at the moment, and he is right in the fact that the Labour members know what needs to happen to trigger a leadership contest, and he is completely right when he says that that's not been triggered yet. So if you're asking me if the Prime Minister's not choosing to resign, then what needs to happen? Then we need somebody to put themselves forward to challenge the leadership.
So in terms of where this goes next, what is your instincts telling you, Matt? Look, you know, you're a proud Labour politician. You represent your constituents, and that's the job you were elected to do. It's the job you want to carry on doing. Which person within the pack, as it were, would suit the longevity of both your position as a Labour MP and a Labour government? Who's likely to be able to cement that to a 2029 victory?
Look, Ian, I think there's several names been pushed around recently. You know, your Wes Streetings, Angela Rayner's, Andy Burnham, maybe. I'm not going to go public just yet on who I'm fully supporting, but we need a change, and there's people both currently within the party and not MPs, but Labour members that would, in my opinion, just give us a little bit of a change and more opportunity moving forward.
Matt, great to have you on with us. Thank you for your time. Matt Bishop, Labour MP for the Forest of Dean, with us on the programme. And that latest resignation, Victims Minister, as Matt just referenced there, Alex Davis-Jones resigning from government. He said this in a letter to Prime Minister. So we've had that in the last half an hour, along with Jess Phillips. There was one this morning. These are relatively junior positions. They're important positions, but they are, in the scale of things, quite junior. So we were talking with Oscar, weren't we, earlier, when Boris was in the thick of it, you suddenly had, all within like 20 minutes, Sajid Javid and Rishi Sunak, of course, who was his Chancellor, saying we're off. That was it. I mean, you can't come back from that. That's your authority absolutely smashed to bits. Some ministers going doesn't quite do that job. If enough of them do, it will have collectively that kind of effect. I don't think Alex Davis-Jones is somebody whose name is right on the tip of anybody's tongue. Not the sort of person that's going to make a pivotal difference in the bigger sense of this situation. But you do wonder. I mean, if a dozen, 2 dozen of those guys, there's lots of ministers, by the way, 2 dozen of those guys were to leg it, then the damage begins. But the damage is already done. I mean, there's no way back for Keir Starmer. The most he can hope for, this is how I see it, and I'm certainly not alone on this, the most he can hope for is that there is a roadmap that's laid out with a date on it. I'll be gone by September the 20th or something. So he's got the summer, and as he moves into winter, he's going to go. That's all he can do. He cannot hang on. 0344 499 1000. What do you sense is the final nail going to be for Keir Starmer? What do you detect is going to happen? And your wider view on where we are today. What an extraordinary time we are in. And this, of course, is less than 24 hours. It all started less than 24 hours after his big reset. Good Lord. 0344 499 1000. You can message 87222. It's 10 to 2. This is Talk.
Chris O'Dowd! When you get the offer to be the voice of a sheep...
Yes, you can only dream, really.
Kelly Riley and Cole Hauser! Well, how much of Rip does your husband in real life have about him?
I mean, yeah. I mean, he's a man.
He's a dude. Kirsty and Phil!
Can we talk about one other thing?
We can talk about loads of things. It's an interview.
Wake up, it's a beautiful morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Peter says Starmer must not be permitted to carry out any more activities that are negative or a danger to this country. I wonder what that could mean. I mean, he is still the Prime Minister. I wonder, because they often say, well, he's got to hang on to be the Prime Minister because we can't be rudderless. And I was walking the dog this morning and I bumped into my mate, South African Tony, and we were chatting about this. And he said, you know when there's a four-way set of traffic lights on a road and it's quite a busy junction, and then one day they break or they're being repaired, and they put out, beware, be careful, the traffic lights are not working at the big junction down the town. But actually everything works fine. And you think, all the traffic's giving way at the right point, everyone was civilised, it all moved. In fact, some said it worked even better. Didn't matter. Got rid of the traffic lights. The road functioned just fine. Could it be like that? Could we have the traffic light analogy played out in Downing Street? No Prime Minister for a couple of... You'd have all the other ministers. You'd have somebody making the ultimate decision. Would that work? Be a bit weird, I grant you that much. Terry's in Dover. What do you think, Terry? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Hi.
I'm puzzled by all this because all I keep hearing is Labour ministers and MPs saying today, we have got to achieve the change the country wants. They don't say what. They can't do what people want. Yeah. They lost in their Labour heartlands because people are angry that they're paying for illegal economic immigration via the small boats. I'll keep this brief, Ian. They're nearly all young men, no families. We've got to stop the pull factor. They're paying for higher bills for net zero when we've got oil and gas in the North Sea, and we only account for 1% global emissions. They're paying for welfare when explosion of anxiety and non-clinical depression, when they're not properly medically assessed. That's one thing. And then there's a lack of growth and job losses because business is overtaxed up to the eyeballs. They're closing, making people redundant and not hiring. No leader of the Labour Party can achieve that. Only a centre-right government can.
Yeah, and I do wonder, I think the last point you made is particularly acute in this respect, Terry, because when we look at that front bench and we see no business experience at all on it, that's not just a quirky fact. That's a devastating reality that business, the backbone. Starmer talks about growth. He's got no one around him that knows anything about growth.
Well, that's why Rachel Reeves hammered business in the budget, isn't it?
Well, because they think that in their instinct, hammering landlords is... Well, it's a good thing, right? It's a good thing because landlord's bad, right? Tenants are good, landlords are bad. That's literally how their brain thinks. Business, you run a business, no matter how small it is, you run a business. People like us don't know anyone who runs businesses. Tax them. That's the way their mind thinks. They're not even bright enough to understand that. And that does sound like a crass and crude way of putting it. I genuinely believe that's the reality, Terry.
Yeah, well, they think business is rolling in it, making too much money.
Of course they do,
or enough money. Yeah. On the renter thing, well, that's another different argument, but we all know what's going to happen there, which is what is happening.
Yep.
Landlords are selling up and
of course they are.
Up.
They've literally been stung out of their own business. I mean, it's outrageous, but of course the likes of Rayner, every time they look at the things we've done, the Renters' Rights Bill, isn't it fantastic? Has anybody actually looked at the Renters' Rights Bill? This is about penalising entrepreneurialism. It's as simple as that. Listen, great call, Terry, for starting us off. Thank you for that. Let's get a voice note on all of this. In Chesterfield, it's hello to Jordan.
I don't think you'll see the end of the week, and I think we'll be saying adios to 3 gear, never here, 2 tier. Let me make this crystal clear. Cheer. Adios, amigo.
Adios, Jordan. Great call. Chris says, so bored of politics. Yeah, I'll make you right. This will be Tim in Yeovil. What have you got, Tim? Hello.
Just a unique point of view.
Yeah, well, I hope so.
Yeah. I've looked up Starmer's star sign. He's a Virgo.
Yeah.
And his secondary is rising in Scorpio. That is a fundamental bad mix of star signs.
Is it? So if you're Virgo and your star is rising in Scorpio, I love this. Listen, why isn't the Today programme doing this kind of stuff?
You see, because you've got to be a bit unique like me. You see, I think laterally.
Yeah. So if you're Virgo with Scorpio rising, what is that? What's the kind of upshot of that astrological concoction?
You don't listen to other people, and it's always your idea.
Yeah.
So does that ring a bell about someone?
But you might argue, and I don't like using the phrase "in fairness to Keir Starmer," you might argue that's a sort of prerequisite for any Prime Minister.
Yes, but you've got to have one that listens.
And he doesn't listen.
No, he don't.
Yeah.
Does he? Do you think he listens?
No, I don't think he does.
No.
And I think he likes the idea. I mean, I think Boris Johnson was the one that had the PhD in liking being Prime Minister. He wasn't too keen on the actual job, and he just wanted to be able to say he'd done it. And but whereas Starmer, I think, wants to think he's done the job and wants to believe he's good at it. Because he genuinely thought, and you can see this with all across the board, from the Rayners to the Rachel Reeves, Lord Hermer, his position on things. I think they thought, we're going to come in and everyone's going to be standing aside like the parting of the waves for the left is to arrive. You know, big round of applause. The adults are back in town. None of us thought that, and it didn't work out like that, and it's ended in utter disaster. But we're only halfway through, of course. Tim, thank you very much indeed. Love that. Virgo with Scorpio rising. Horrific for the Prime Minister, says Tim. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Afternoon. Yes, it is the home of common sense. So much to get through. We know there was a cabinet meeting this morning. Of course, Keir Starmer blocking those rebel ministers. Some have resigned. Apparently some senior cabinet ministers, including the Foreign Secretary and the Home Secretary, did have a polite word with Keir Starmer saying, look, Prime Minister. I don't think this can carry on. Of course, journalists at the ready. Many of those front benchers weren't able to unequivocally say in those interviews this morning that, yes, 100% Keir Starmer will still be in office in 2 years' time or even 2 weeks' time. More response on that. And there's around about 83 to 100 Labour MPs putting pressure on the PM to resign now, according to new figures that have just been published as well. Just to chime in with this, borrowing is at its highest since 1998. It's a 28-year peak. So that backdrop against the woes. Tomorrow is the King's speech. Will that bring up any a morsel of comfort for the PM? Of course, he wrote it, so he'll know. And amidst all the chaos, the King will deliver that speech tomorrow, detailing the government's legislative plans. Sir Keir Starmer's utter incompetence, however, is set to intensify scrutiny of the speech as the economy, immigration and the environment are set to make big appearances. And then there's the next Mandelson drop. Not during the King's speech, by the way. That would be something, wouldn't it, if the King started to read out the transcripts from police interviews. But that's just lurking around the corner. More on that as well. 0344 499 1000. This from James, who says, Ian, it's going to end up like the Boris saga, where he sets a timetable to last the summer so he can enjoy the holiday homes. Could be a bit of that. You think, well, I'll have the summer. I won't quite get Christmas at Chequers again. Because I would imagine Christmas at Chequers is probably a pretty tasty affair. You wouldn't even have to put your own Christmas tree. Your Christmas tree would be about 50 foot tall, wouldn't it? Right in front of a fire, a proper fire that you know the mantelpiece has been fingered relentlessly by the good and the great over the years. Churchill, everyone you can think of has had their paw prints over every bit of oak panelling. And that is where you spend Christmas Day, opening your prezzies. It doesn't get any better than that, but I don't think Starmer will see that again. Stop it at the back. This from Karen in Wales says, we need a general election. The different factions of the Labour Party are daggers drawn. When internal cohesion breaks down, there is no way back. That's absolutely bang on. I mean, that is really bang on. Internal cohesion, when that... I genuinely, objectively, cannot see how you can survive this if you are Keir Starmer. Let's speak with Tatton Spiller, founder of Simple Politics, always a logical brain to bring into the proceedings. Tatton, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
I hope I haven't overstated things there. Look, my point, I guess I was making there, is that even if you are a diehard Keir Starmer fan, it's very hard to say, yep, carry on, Keir, nothing to see here.
Well, I think that's completely not true, because I think that one thing we need to look at here is, how does anything get better? Do we really believe that if Keir Starmer, right, ditches his thing right now, he comes out and says, OK, fair enough, Jess Phillips has gone, I'm going too. What happens next? Is that going to be any different? And you were just saying a second ago, general election. What happens if there's a general election? Probably Reform would be the largest party. Now, Nigel Farage himself says that they haven't got the experience in running stuff yet. They're trying to recruit people. They're trying to bring people in. So if Nigel Farage doesn't think that they're quite ready for government yet, then it would be a shame to bring them in so soon. So if they're not ready, who else is going to come up?
But that's if you had a general election, right? I mean,
sure.
I mean, if I was, I would suggest, Tatton, and I'm not a supporter of these people, but I think Andy Burnham, if you're a Labour voter, is probably better than Keir Starmer. Oh, by the way, I don't understand why everybody's dining out on Andy Burnham as if he's JFK or something, but nonetheless, his name seems to have sort of grown, and I think the reputation is preceding him somewhat. But nonetheless, I think he would be better for Labour than Keir Starmer. That's reasonable, isn't it?
Well, based on what? I've seen no Burnham policies for government.
You don't need any in the Labour government. You don't have to have a policy, you just have to hate the Tories.
We need to find some stability as a country. The Conservatives chopping and changing prime ministers every week didn't work for anybody. And to continue doing so now is really problematic unless we have a clear vision. One of the reasons Starmer's in such trouble is because his election manifesto was so weak and so thin. He just stood on not being Rishi Sunak. And he's very good at not being Rishi Sunak. He's definitely not him.
Yeah.
And that's put him in trouble. So if anyone's going to come in and replace them, I want strong policy and ideology. I want to know what they're going to do for the country, not whether they're going to look a bit different.
I wonder whether, I mean, I think you could kind of take it back to 2024. Lots of people, including myself to a degree, even though I do this for a living, Tatton, I did think a bit that Starmer was going to come in. All the criticism we now have of Starmer, we didn't quite have back then. I appreciate he wasn't Prime Minister, but even if you try to intellectualise the debate and say, well, OK, wasn't Prime Minister, but what was the perception of Starmer? It wasn't really that bad. And I sensed that when he comes in, it's going to be a bit of a kind of Blair Brown moment when he's going to hit the ground running at number 10 and he's going to suddenly unleash this barrage, this cacophony of policies that are just going to be flowing by the day as they did in 1997. And that didn't happen, but he did decide to turn the heating off for some pensioners. That's what did happen. And then that was it. And almost as if, well, we're not the Tories, that's got to be enough for us, because surely everybody will love us. And they didn't come in with a grand plan despite having all those years to plan it.
One thing I always really enjoy about being on your show, Ian, is that you start talking, I immediately disagree with everything you've said. But
then you secretly come round to it in your subconscious.
Oh, no, it must be I'm getting older.
I've now got to think of a way to disagree with Ian, even though I agree.
No, I agree. I agree with everything you've just said.
Yeah.
It felt like he was the grown-up in the room for a long time, and that we would come in and we would see change. That was the one word in his manifesto, change.
Yeah.
And here we are, nothing has changed at all. We're seeing the same scandal, the same resignations. I mean, this ongoing Mandelson stuff. It's all the same as it was.
So what happens then? What? Surely, by definition of what you've just said, there needs to be a new kid on the block.
But will that bring change? Yeah, do you know what? I am more than happy to get rid of this fellow and have someone else in, but not if they're only going to be given 18 months themselves, because actually political change takes a lot of time. So if we do get someone new, it has to be for keeps, right? You cannot just go, oh yeah, Burnham, oh no, didn't like that, oh let's go streeting in again, let's, Ed Miliband, the returning leader. Is this sensible? Is it going to work? We don't need an election in this country right now. With world instability, we need to find something that works.
I did hear that the mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, is making his way down to London and might already be here. It's a very swift 2 hours, 7 minutes from Piccadilly to Euston. Done the journey so many times, I've forgotten. Oh, he's here now already. There will be many reasons why a mayor from another part of the country would visit another city. I get that. Maybe there's a mayor powwow going on over there at Sadiq's place. I have no idea. But either way, you are forced to wonder, is he on manoeuvres?
I think he could probably manoeuvre quite successfully from Manchester. I think that he is able to use a telephone, and probably he's a WhatsApp aficionado. So I'm not particularly going to read much into him being in London. I think that if he was going to make a stand and say something, then doing it from Manchester would be a good look.
Well, you say that, but if you'd bothered Tatton to Wikipedia Andy Burnham, you realise he's got a phobia of phones, particularly the WhatsApp facility that appears on many of them. So maybe it's his only way of communicating. Oh, I've got something to say. I'll jump on a train. Maybe that's his thing. So do you sense then, 3 months down the line, you think Keir Starmer will still be the Prime Minister?
God, I mean, who knows? Who knows? I think he probably should be, because I think if there is going to be a transition, it needs to be long and slow. And I think that we need to be, I mean, look at, you were talking about what the markets are doing with borrowing. So we need to calm down, get it done slowly, get it done right. Of course, Burnham should be given the opportunity to come into Westminster if he can win an election, which of course the by-elections are difficult, and that's going to be a difficult conversation with having a mayor of Manchester election too. But if everyone can calm down and take a minute, none of this has to be decided today. None of it has to be decided this month. this idea of conference in September being a marker, it doesn't need to be that. It can take a long time, have really clear, thoughtful arguments, and then someone comes in who has ideas behind them in a safe, secure way for the country.
All right, on that point, Tatton, thank you. Tatton Spiller, founder of Simple Politics. Let's speak with Lord Jonathan Marland, Tory peer and chairman of the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council. Jonathan, good to have you on with us again.
Long time no see.
Yeah, lovely to have you with us. I was just listening to our previous speaker. I'm genuinely not quite sure what point he was making, but nonetheless, he thinks that Starmer, should probably stay there. It's very hard to see, and you've been round the block enough to see things come and go and how these things tend to work. I mean, it's ridiculous, surely, that Keir Starmer can survive this.
He's a dead man walking.
Yeah.
And he's a dead man walking because not only has he lost his party, but he's lost the civil service. Chopping and firing civil servants, who now will be out to seek revenge. I mean, this is a hopeless situation when you haven't got the key civil servants working in your favour, and add to that this sort of constant stream of ministers resigning. Another one resigned 5 minutes ago. I've got my phone here, Ian, in case we tell each other someone else has gone. Yes. They'll all start going, he's a dead man walking.
Yeah. I mean, and even if he, I don't know, if he thought he was going to hang on until tomorrow, even the current state, if we froze and paused this moment, he's got 4 senior cabinet ministers telling him he should go. He's got nearly 100 of his own backbenchers telling him he should go. He was just annihilated in the local elections, including the entirety of Wales that rejected him. He's got the Peter Mandelson saga hanging round his neck, part 2 of which is going to drop in a couple of days. I mean, on what measure would anybody be advising Keir Starmer to hang on?
Well, exactly. I can't disagree with the word you said, which I rarely do, by the way. So,
well, that's always good to
hear. He's had it. Even if he stays in post, he's had it because the levers of government will not work effectively for him.
Is there a sort of bittersweet moment here as a Conservative, though, Jonathan, where you think, well, actually, if Kemi Badenoch and the Conservative Party, and I suppose this would apply to Reform and others, if you really want to make inroads, then keep Keir Starmer there, because he's the greatest example of political ineptitude out of the choice that is there, and your chances of beating him are increased if he's the man that's still in number 10.
Well, you're right, but you've got to be careful what you wish for as well, because the alternatives that we may get could be far worse. Yeah. I hear the hard left talking about wealth taxes in the same breath as supporting working people, as if people who make money don't work. I mean, the country's in a complete mess, and there's got to be a vision of how we get out of it. We've just seen that borrowing's now gone, government borrowing to 5.13%. Income tax, welfare has exceeded income tax for the first time in the country's history. They've been spiteful in their class war towards people in the countryside, public schools, farmers, even the House of Lords, where I sit. They've been very spiteful in the way that they've gone about this sort of class war. And it could get even worse. And as a result, the country will descend. People will leave in droves. They might have left for Dubai, and some of them thinking of coming back, but they'll find somewhere else, I assure you. And it's not tenable, Ian, as you know, and you're a hard-working person yourself.
Indeed. And what do you sense, though, is the likelihood in terms of who jumps into those big shoes at number 10? Look, no one suggests it's an easy job. We know it's anything but. I cannot imagine the level of what it does to your brain capacity to wear all of those hats, how you sleep at night, all of the rest of it.
Well, it's crisis management, isn't it?
Of course it is.
Crisis after crisis. Look, what do I know? But my friends in the Labour Party tell me it's not going to be either Sweeting or Rayner, and there may be someone who we yet don't know.
Wow, that's going to be interesting. I wonder.
It'll be interesting. Often in these cases, as you know, someone emerges who you don't think is likely, and they may well, in this case, obviously, Andy Burnham, people talk about him, but he's got to get a seat, hasn't he?
Yeah, that's very true, and that, of course, is a process in itself. Getting that up and running
Correct.
would be, a couple of months, and then the campaign itself, another 6
But
weeks.
also, Ian, sorry to interrupt you,
Not
but
at all.
what's the result of the by-election going to be?
Well, indeed, there's a big old bear trap there, isn't there, potentially for Andy Burnham if he decides to stand in what was previously a safe Labour seat. That could, that could have changed anyway after the local elections, but this might change it again in terms of the safety of a safe Labour seat.
Yeah. So Labour have got to be careful what they wish for, and we as a country have got to be very careful what we wish for. As a Conservative, I can say, thank God our last government went. We all hoped that Starmer would come in and he would unite the country. Yeah. We wanted change. The country wanted change, and we hoped that it would be a very sensible, long-term thinking government. And of course, we've had nothing but disaster after disaster. And I'm afraid, it was bad for the Conservatives, of which I'm one, I freely admit. But this is going to be terrible for Labour, whatever happens now.
Whatever happens now. Jonathan, great to see you again. Thank you for coming on. Lord Jonathan Marland, Tory peer. He's also the chairman of the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council, conceding the ineptitudes of the previous Conservative government. But I don't think anybody quite expected. Could it be any worse? Rishi Sunak was in a bit of a quandary. Quite not sure what Sunakism is. Still an MP, of course, Sunak, down there in Southampton. 0344 499 1000. What is the final nail for Keir Starmer? Yvonne says, so Tatton thinks we need to take it slowly and come to a considered position. What planet is he on? We want this Lion MP gone now. But who replaces him? Maybe we could have a kind of, I can't remember who first suggested, the masked singer. We should have the masked Prime Minister. So we just, it's an interesting thought. And then maybe after a year of being the Prime Minister, you whip off, take it off. Stephen Mulhern walks in with a microphone, or that other fella whose name escapes me, and you realise, oh, look, it's Zara Sultana. I don't know, whoever might be underneath the mask. Could it be any worse than what we've experienced in the last couple of years? Thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000.
The offer to be the voice of a sheep.
Yes, you can only dream, really.
Kelly Riley and Cole Hauser. How much of Rip does your husband in real life have about him?
I mean, yeah. I mean, he's mad.
Say
He's deep.
Kirsty and Phil!
Can we talk about one other thing?
We can talk about loads of things. It's an interview.
Wake up, it's a beautiful morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Rickster says, so you genuinely want to cancel marches so that you and your son can go and watch the cup final? No, I didn't genuinely say... Oh. There's a Unite the Kingdom march which will be attended by a gazillion people. And then I don't know whether this pro-Palestine thing is going to happen on the same day. I think last time there was a counter-protest, wasn't there, about... tempted to say about 5,000 people, which was so tiny compared to the Unite the Kingdom march. The point I was making, when you're taking your lad to a football match, which is already going to be... And if you take a kid to... The first football match I took him to was West Ham City at West Ham. And he'd never experienced that. And it's a very tribal experience. And when you suddenly find yourself, especially the walk towards the stadium, when the singing and the chanting is getting a little louder. These are the West Ham fans, and we're in that melee. I think he found that a bit daunting. I think most people would. So off we're going to trot on Saturday to Wembley. But naturally, I know London's a big old place. You are going to encounter an element, even if it's only on the flipping tube, of people that are there for marches and celebrate, whatever it is. So it will be an awful lot of people. I mean, walking to Wembley Stadium is full of tens and tens of thousands of people. That's big stuff anyway. And he's been there a couple of times, see different things. But then you factor in a load of other people. It's just a busy day in the city. But no, I don't want to cancel anything. I'd quite like to cancel the anti-Israel marches, but that's another story. Andrew is in Hertfordshire. Andrew, what a day. What a day. I think we might say this every day this week.
Yeah, well, we have always called this, haven't we, you and I?
Yeah.
I did tell you he'd be gone, and we're going to an election because we'll just go into a period of time where the Labour Party... Neither side wants the other to win. Streeting's lot doesn't want Miliband to win. Miliband doesn't want Streeting to win.
Well, this is this is keeping Starmer in place at the moment, isn't it? Because his enemies are also divided.
And that's the thing. What he said, remember, he's a man of process. He told them, you haven't got the numbers. Yeah. And until they come together, i.e. the left and the right work together, he'll still be there. And it will just be this horrible inertia.
Yeah.
And it's the thing that he said, it's country above party. It's not, Keir. The country is at war with Russia. We're at war. We're helping Ukraine. We have all the problems of the anti-Semitism, fuel through the roof. The supply chain is about to be compromised. And he can't make the decision that benefits the country. We are people have missed the point here. Forget the Labour Party. Yeah. We're in a bad... And look at the markets. They're about, as I've always said to you, they're about to nail the pound to the back of the West Ham goal.
The nice analogy. What would a new Labour leader have to do to to make a difference and make an impact?
The first thing the Labour leader would have to do is reverse the national insurance rise. The second thing they'd have to do is the two-child benefit, reverse that, show the market that they're serious, cut 60 billion out of the NHS budget and just tell them to deliver the same service for less money, and then turn on the benefits. If you're a migrant and you turn up in this country, illegal migrant, you get £50 a week. If you not put anything into the system, you get £50 a week. Just bring that in.
So that would be something you might want to do if you're not a Labour supporter. But the trouble is, as a Labour person, and particularly a Labour person at the moment, all the markers are pointing to that party having to go more left.
Yeah, you're right. And what will happen is that in an attempt to do that, if you get Miliband, remember his father was the guru whose feet Corbyn and Ben sat at. So he will bring Corbyn back in the party and negate the Greens. That's what he would do. But the policies, unfortunately, Ian, the markets will dictate the policies. We're going to an election before September.
Before September?
Yeah.
Wow.
I told you he'd be gone before July last year, and the markets will dictate we have to go to an election.
So you don't think, because there was a suggestion that they would set out this roadmap, and the roadmap would involve the month of September.
Yeah, they haven't got the numbers.
So
and until they get the numbers behind one person, they're not going to do anything.
So what do they do then? Do they keep with Starmer until the election? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, they do what Starmer does best, follow the process. Until they get 81, we're stuck with him.
Interesting, Andrew. Thank you for that, Andrew in Hertfordshire. This comes in from Paul in Fife. Why do politicians on the left continue with the false premise that we don't need a general election right now? A general election is exactly what the country needs. Are they all infected with some form of brain-shrinking virus? It's a good point. Yesterday on the programme, I'm trying to think who it was who said it. It was a caller from the right of politics, who made the point that, this is our system. We elect people. We're much like the agitators who wanted to rerun the Brexit vote. They said, well, no, there's been a vote, and there's been a result of the vote, and the vote, it was conclusive. Might have been close, but it was conclusive. It was a win, and people voted to leave the EU. And then when others go, well, I think we need another vote on that. Well, no, you don't have another vote. Is this not the same territory where, as awful as it might be for so many people, I don't know who's enjoying life under this government. Even if you allow for the obvious, like there are certain things that are sort of out of your control, Iran and oil prices and all the rest of it, I get it. But I don't really speak to many people on the left who go, yeah, we're doing great. Well, there's sort of heady days of Blairism, and even when Brown stepped in, he didn't have this smell around him for the entirety of his... He might have looked he was a bit of a kind of slightly unconventional character, Gordon Brown, but he was a bit dour and all the rest of it, but nice enough bloke. He didn't have all of this stuff following him around. But this lot, they really do. However, the Labour government, not Keir Starmer, the Labour government were elected to serve until 2029. So whether people like it or not, do we not have to just adhere to that? And in a curious way, I mean, it's all very well saying, well, let's hope the person's worse than Starmer, because then Reform or the Tories have got a greater chance of getting in. But actually, and it's hard to say this sometimes, we should all be hoping that whoever our Prime Minister is, that they're good, and the country grows under them and things get better and there is a sense. I just don't know who's going to fulfil that role, because parties don't function like that. And whoever comes in has got to have a bigger nod to the left than they do to the right for Labour. So whether that is Burnham, Streeting or whoever. Who gets the big job? What is the final nail, though, for Keir Starmer? 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This comes in from Ian, who says, if you look at the front bench of Labour, how the hell did they get there? And what can we expect when Keir goes? That's it, I'm off down the pub. If I can find one that hasn't been closed, thanks to Rachel. It's a good point, Ian. What would we expect? What level of brilliance is going to take over? And everybody, even those on the opposite side, can go, oh, my goodness, you know, I thought they were terrible. Well, actually, they're not too bad, because, look, Wes Streeting is running. I just don't imagine that. Let's speak to Jake Berry, former Conservative chairman, now member of Reform UK. Afternoon, Jake. Nice to have you with us.
Yeah, good to be on. Lovely to see you.
It's a curious time, isn't it? No one's really shedding any tears for Keir Starmer, but of course, all of this does come under the bracket of be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is clearly rolling now. He had a cabinet meeting this morning where he tried to shut it down. He failed, just like his relaunch speech yesterday failed. You've now got actually very good Labour ministers like Alex Davis-Jones, who's just resigned within the last hour or so. He's done, and I think the question we now have to ask ourselves is how long will his death rattle be for, and what will come next?
I would assume, Jake, it's going to be he's not going to, you know, well, if we look at our screens and suddenly we see one of those podium things being placed outside Downing Street as they do, and you think, oh, here it comes. He's not going to say, I'm going at 3:20 on Thursday, is he? It's going to be a sort of a route to, you know, I will stay in situ, and then in September the NEC or whoever, the NCC, whatever it is, they've got so many little organisations.
Oh, it'll be all right.
And then I will go. So, and in an orderly style, or you know, that kind of language. So it's going to be months down the line, right?
Yeah, I think so. Look, this could take up to 3 months, especially if they allow the time for Andy Burnham to fight a by-election. About the minimum amount of time that can happen in is, I would suggest, 5 or 6 weeks. Okay, the election could be a month, but you've got to create the vacancy. A writ has to be moved in Parliament. There's various things to jump over. And I tell you what, why that is really, really bad is because our nation is in crisis. There is a war raging in the Middle East. There is a war in Europe. We've seen that gilt yields have gone up to their highest level since 1997 earlier today, up to 6% on the 30-year gilt. The entirety of the government is focused on, will Keir Starmer survive? Will he not survive? Who will replace him? While the British people are looking around at their nation saying that our nation is in ashes. You cannot see a doctor. I think next week, transport workers in London go back on strike. Our armed forces are completely hollowed out and denuded at a point, most dangerous point probably of my lifetime. Yeah. This is the Labour Party having an internal conversation with itself. They are not serving Britain. It is absolute chaos. And the final thing I'll say is to drag the King into this farce tomorrow on the King's speech, a 77-year-old cancer patient being dragged to Parliament by a Prime Minister who, if you look at his own backbenchers and now ministers who are resigning, will not have the authority to get that King's speech through Parliament, is a disgrace. I frankly don't know what you do about it because Parliament's currently suspended. I don't know if there's a sort of half measure you can take, but to bring the King this way into politics to try and bolster a failing Prime Minister, I think is not British, is not what...
So you think they should have postponed the King's speech?
Well, I think it's beginning to look like that, isn't it? To get your King's speech through, you have to have a majority.
Well, yeah.
85 plus now, I think, members of his team have said that they won't support him. Well, that's got rid of his majority. And this is bringing the King and the House of Commons and Parliament into disrepute to try and save one man who is, not what our country needs. I think the British people made their views about him very clear in the most recent elections. Yeah. It's now all about how they can save Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. It is nothing to do with ordinary people up and down Britain who just want the country to be better.
What does your gut tell you, Jake? I know, you're a Reform member. Who the Labour Party appoint is kind of up to them, but of course they will be our Prime Minister. So what do you sense is likely to be the result of a challenge to Keir Starmer?
This is crystal ball time. I'll just get my, get my crystal ball out and polish it. it seems to me quite likely that there will be a candidate of the right, and I believe that will be Wes Streeting, who seems to be the most organised, and a candidate of the left. And if we look at who those left-wing candidates could be, it could be Angela Rayner. I think actually quite unlikely, because she's still under investigation or has an ongoing investigation into her tax affairs. It could be Andy Burnham. Again, I think possible, but unlikely, because I'd struggle to see a constituency he could win. Or it could be Ed Miliband. And that is where I come down, and I think the most likely competition, and I say this is crystal ball gazing, I'll probably be proved wrong in about 10 minutes time, but is Wes Streeting versus Ed Miliband. And why I think ultimately the Labour Party would come behind Ed Miliband is, I mean, I don't know what elections they were looking at, but if you talk to Labour MPs, and I've just actually been over in Parliament and spoken, or outside Parliament, and happened to run into one in the street and spoke to them, they think the problem they have is that the Labour Party isn't left-wing enough. It's not left-wing enough, guys. Wake up. You've just been battered by the Reform Party, and you think the answer is to become more left-wing. These people aren't fit to run our nation. And what I do hope we will see is whoever the next Prime Minister will be, whoever he or she may be, that in a reasonable period of time, maybe 6, 12, 18 months, we will have a general election. Because this mandate, this shallow mandate that Starmer has, is a personal mandate. Who was on the front of their manifesto? Him, a photograph of him. And if he is no longer there, we should have a general election. I know we don't have to have it. That's not how our constitution works. To get a new mandate for whoever will be our next leader.
Yeah. Wise words and greatly put. Jake, thank you very much indeed. Lovely to see you again as well. Jake Berry, former Conservative Party chairman, now, of course, a member of Reform UK. If it was a kind of debate about what's going to provide most fun and jaw-dropping moments and likely to lead to this government being replaced, then the answer has to be, I think, Ed Miliband, right? I was just thinking Angela Rayner, but I sense she's sort of team. There is another theory, by the way, and that is that Angela Rayner takes the job, so they do this as quickly as they can, and then gives it to Andy Burnham. I don't know if that could work, but it's kind of hypothetical. Probably couldn't work. But if Ed Miliband was the Prime Minister, then Labour will be out of power for probably 500 years. I'm going to say maybe 502 if it gets really bad. Louise is in Kent. Louise, what have you got for us? Hello.
Hi, Ian. Now, I think what's really interesting about this, if you look at the whole overview of it, we know that the Labour have a terrible regicide problem. They cannot get rid of their people at all. And yet the Tories were the other way completely. They got rid of them at grey abandon. And I think we've swung from one to the other, because I'm not sure that this way is really any better at all, because we're left with absolute chaos, with the chap not refusing to go, but there's nobody really in line to come over either. So you've got this crazy situation where it's terribly hard to get rid of anyone in Labour, but then in the Tories, they go completely the other direction. I think it was interesting as well, your chap earlier on speaking about reform. If we had an election, as in he announced it and it happened, Reform aren't ready yet. They're just not ready. I think in a year's time, they might be. And actually, when I heard Nick, what's his name? Their chap speaking on a podcast the other day about all the work they're doing behind the scenes to get ready. I really saw that, because I personally wouldn't vote for them at the moment, because I really like Kemi. But I think in a year's time, they might have evened out. And I think then they would have to work together to bring a government in. But they're just not ready at the moment.
That could... and when we say ready, I mean, that would be just in terms of the people you need, right? I mean, not in terms of policy as such, but, I mean, they like all parties, who couldn't do with another few months' notice on something as big as an election. But in terms of the amount of people you'd need to fight those seats, I mean, the Tories won't find themselves having a straight run either, but they do have maybe more people waiting in the wings because they've been around that long.
Yeah, but I think what we will see over the next year, I think Kemi will tighten up how they manage people standing. There'll be much more transparency over that. I mean, I think Kemi's great, and I think there's a lot of mileage in that. And I keep on saying I think we've got a hare and a tortoise situation here with Reform and Tories. Anyway, I think
if
in a year's time,
she needs a couple of big moments. You know, a bit like having that exciting first album. There's got to be some real bangers on there, and if she can do that,
I think increasing they are coming. You've only had to look at that support the Jewish, the anti-Semitic thing the other day when she spoke to tremendous applause. And yet when the Labour minister turned up, he got booed to great effect.
I think that was McFadden,
Those
wasn't
kind
it?
of things I think are really good for her. But I think in a year's time, I think we could see some real progress with the Tories, but I think also Reform will have got a lot of things in place. They'll have ironed out some of their policy stuff. They'll have some much better people coming through, some really clear ideas what they want to do. And I think we could be in a very different situation in a year's time. But in the meantime, it's a crazy thing when you can't get rid of a Labour Prime Minister who's just failing in every direction, and yet we've got the Tories who get rid of them of gay abandon. And we've got to go somewhere down the middle, if you see what I mean. It's gone from one extreme to the other. We've almost got to go down somewhere down the middle with if somebody is failing in government or people, for whatever reason, want to get rid of them, there's got to be a sort of common ground. You can't get rid of them too quickly, but on the other hand, you can't be in a situation where you just can't get rid of them.
It's a great put. Louise, cracking call. Thank you very much indeed for that. Louise in Kent, where are you at on this one? What is likely to be the final nail for Keir Starmer? Today, apparently, according to Keir Starmer, was not the final nail. He's like saying, I'm hanging. I mean, just think about how ridiculous this is. I appreciate that he's got a... you could argue, if you wanted to be generous, he's got a job to do, and therefore he needs to sort of impart a level of stability and focus. So just simply saying, yeah, it's all done, and then there's a hullabaloo and God knows what happens and the place falls apart. Yeah, but I don't think it is that. I think this is Keir Starmer and his own job, his own position. I think he's considering his own career on this. You've got nearly 100 MPs that don't want you there. And as Jake Berry brilliantly said, you go to the King's Speech, they vote on the King's Speech, of course. Do we approve this? How does he do that with 100 of his own MPs who not quite resigned, but it's in that ballpark, really. They don't support their own leader. I mean, this is a mess. Surely constitutionally it's a mess. I don't know how that is addressed fully. Doubtless they'll hold their nose and vote for things, but they would in effect be supporting Keir Starmer each time. We're going to check the chronology as well on the Mandelson files, the latest, I hate that word, drop. They've just dropped. The Pfizer files have dropped. Remember that? This is the Mandelson files that are dropping. These will be the bits that they couldn't include initially when we found out more about the kind of email dialogues that Peter Mandelson had potentially with Jeffrey Epstein. And who knows, maybe others. That information, which the Met Police said, look, we can give you so much information, we can't give it all of it because it could affect an investigation. I think we're nearing that moment. I've heard people say days, but I don't know what that means. 0344 499 1000. We've got a brand new Voice of Doom, by the way. That's coming in a couple of moments. And, of course, back with you on the phones as well. This is Talk.
Chris O'Dowd! When you get the offer to be the voice of a sheep...
Yes, you can only dream, really.
Kelly Riley and Cole Hauser! Well, how much of Rip does your husband in real life have about him?
I mean, yeah. I mean, he's mad.
Say
He's dead.
Kirsty and Phil!
Can we talk about one other thing?
We can talk about loads of things. It's an interview.
Wake up, it's a beautiful morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. This comes from Carl in Derbyshire, who says, I like Kemi, but she's dragging an anvil around with her. The Liberal Tory party. They are... Yeah, look, we talk about divided parties. There's a massive problem that she's got at Tory HQ. Let's see how that pans out in the coming months. And this from John in Essex. Ian, surely if Miliband gets picked as the next Prime Minister, that's got to be a mandate for a general election, as he stood as leader in a general election before and lost. Yeah, I mean, you might desire it. I would kind of agree with John. I would think, well, hang on a second. That's a fella that the country rejected previously. But, of course, you vote for the party and not the person, even though we know you kind of don't, if that makes sense. Right, Voice of Doom. This is the mystery voice bit, but it's political, so you're always looking for a politician, past or present, left or right, dead or alive. Simple question. Who is this?
I simply don't know.
Well, let's hear that again.
I simply don't know.
A bit of West Country in there? I don't know. I'm not giving any clues. I don't even know who it is. Oh, yes, I do. Sorry, I do know who it is. Let's hear it again.
I simply don't know.
And again?
I simply don't know.
Now, there's only one way you can have a crack at this, and that's 87222. Don't be phoning, don't be Xing or anything else, or even going to our Facebook page, which, by the way, doesn't exist as far as I know. Let's hear it again.
I simply don't know.
87222 if you think you know who that is. If somebody gets it bang on, we'll tell you after the news who it is. If not, it rolls over to tomorrow. One more time.
I simply don't know.
Back to your calls. Phil is in Hertfordshire. Phil, what have you got for us?
Ian, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. A couple of points. Good afternoon. We were saying earlier about like who's going to be the new leader of Labour, blah blah blah. Do you know? I really don't think it matters, Ian, because I believe the majority of the electorate believe that the the Labour are in the same place as the Conservatives were when they lost the general election. You know, the trust has gone. Nobody cares. We don't really care who the next Labour leader is. They're going to make no difference whatsoever, simply because they betrayed the people of this country. That's it. They've got to come out with a completely new way of thinking and putting the people first, which they're not going to do. So I really don't think it matters who the Prime Minister is going to be. And they're only a front face anyway. Now, another thing as well that your previous caller was saying about reforms not ready, they're not ready, they're not ready. Yeah. When you look at the government that we've got at the moment and the cabinet ministers, there's hardly any experience there, is there?
No, not at all. I think the comment about not being ready is more about numbers than, about literally having enough 655 people to stand. I think that's the general concern.
Yeah, all right, I'll take that point. I'll concede on that one. What I was going to say, though, Ian, is these front people of these ministers, they all have advisors. So they're not coming up with these great ideas on their own.
No.
They're just the front people. Their advisors are telling them what to say. Their advisors are telling them what we're going to do, and they just put it forward. With reform, I think there's some seriously good people behind the scenes that have got a lot of experience in life, in business, and things in general that are really going to be pivotal in advising the next government, hopefully the reform government, because it's them people that are going to really lay the foundations for it. But also, reform have got the people that are going to be able to present that and put it forward, that they can speak and face the country and talk to the country and not off an auto cue. They'll connect with people. And I think that's very, very important. So, they are ready and they're not ready. They're not ready in, say, numbers, like you quite rightly say.
Yep.
But those people are just going to be dealing with their constituents, really, aren't they, mainly? That
is very true. I do wonder about, nobody ever came into politics, whether you're left-wing, right-wing, somewhere in the middle. Everybody came into it, one would assume, unless you're, some kind of subhuman oddball, because they thought they could make a difference, right? They think I could make a difference. Plus, it's increasingly seen as quite a good gig, nice pension scheme and all the rest of it. You can hang on for 3 terms, you're doing all right. So there's that. But generally speaking, people go, I'd like to I want to advance my belief, and this is the party that I think I'm better to join in order to do that. But then when something happens when you get into power, and it's not that the leaders necessarily change it. I think they're met with I think the biggest reality check they have, Phil, is the time frame of doing something. Where, somebody, a civil servant, I'm not talking about some oddball civil servant, one of those that really does know what they're talking about, will say, it's a cracking idea, Prime Minister, but it will take you about 18 years. And it's that, I think, they come up against. So they end up kind of just sticking with the status quo because it's too much hassle, or it's more expensive than they thought.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good point.
It sounds a bit defeatist saying that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do know what you mean. But we've come to a point now in politics, Ian, where we need to change. There's got to be some radical thinking.
I mean, huge change. Yes, you're right.
Huge change. Absolutely. Politics of the past is finished. It's gone because slowly the people have been neglected. They've been forgotten, and it's time that pendulum swung back the other way now, and they have to remember the people vote the MPs in to represent the people.
Yeah.
And the country. And I think that's what they've lost sight of that, Ian. They've lost sight of it.
You're absolutely spot on. Listen, Phil, I'm going to move only just to get another voice on before the news, but what a great conversation. Thank you, Phil in Hertfordshire. Let's continue in that vein with Sarah in South London. What do you think, Sarah? What have you got for us?
Well, I phoned up because of a previous caller who mentioned Keir Starmer's sun sign in astrology.
Yes, apparently he's a Virgo with Scorpio rising or something.
Yes, exactly.
What's all that about?
And, well, I had a quick look. I haven't got the full picture, but I had a quick look. And some quite interesting things came up.
Yeah.
One is that he's very organised, quite a nice person, basically as a person, as it were. And he likes to operate with groups of people in a career setting. Also, he strives for recognition and success in a career sense, even when he's on the back foot. Yeah. He wants to be recognised. And then in the area of home, travel is very strongly highlighted. And basically in his work and everyday life, he's very impulsive and answers to no one, which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to abroad, he seems to have he cares a lot about abroad, which could indicate having family roots or connections there. But that's something else that he's been accused of, isn't it?
Yeah, typical Virgo. Okay, what about that? Listen, I love it. Sarah.
Can I just add one more thing?
Briefly, if you could, only because of the news.
Quickly.
Far away, go on.
Yes, I know, yeah. The other one was his ascendant sign of Scorpio, which you mentioned.
Yes.
Scorpio is a sign that is that has hidden depths, can be very vindictive, and fights to the death.
Right. You see, maybe that's the bit. Fight to the death. Sarah, Thank you. Russell Grant, who's a dear friend of this show, will be proud of these predictions. We've got a voice of doom on the way. Who is this?
I simply don't know.
87222. If you want to have a crack at that, let's get the news at 3.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome back to the Home of Common Sense. What a day over there in Downing Street. It's got a little bit quiet, not quite tumbleweed territory at the moment. We know that it was, or it started, certainly all guns blazing, and everybody thought, well, Prime Minister's going to be gone by about 10:30. He's hanging on in there despite Cabinet Ministers saying you might want to consider this, despite nearly 100 Labour MPs saying we don't support you anymore, and despite the fact that only a week ago, less than, he got an absolute hammering in the local elections. There's about 83 to 90 Labour MPs at the moment putting the pressure on the Prime Minister. And by the way, this all comes against the backdrop of new figures that reveal the government borrowing has hit its highest for nearly 3 decades. Man alive. The good news just keeps coming, doesn't it, for Keir Starmer? And amidst all of this, of course, the King will deliver the King's speech tomorrow, detailing the government's legislative plans. Now, that's going to be rather interesting, of course, as MPs vote on this thing afterwards. Well, how are they going to vote on the Labour benches if they no longer support their own leader? All of this and more coming up. If you'd like to take part, 0344 499 1000. And, of course, you can message 87222. And this one message comes in from Stork, who says, "Afternoon, Ian. I don't understand why David Lammy's name hasn't been put in the hat for a possible replacement for the PM. I know, we keep wondering this. Why would you not put the Plato-like figure that is David Lammy? I mean, why ever not? He'd be amazing." No tongue-in-cheek, of course. Following, of course, those local election defeats that I mentioned, Prime Minister Keir Starmer is making his political future dependent on a major commitment to strengthening his ties with the EU. Now, we heard a lot about this yesterday. Let's have a listen to a little snippet of that reset speech.
This Labour government will be defined by rebuilding our relationship with Europe, by putting Britain at the heart of Europe, so that we are stronger on the economy, stronger on trade, stronger on defence, you name it. Because standing shoulder to shoulder with the countries that most share our interests, our values, and our enemies, that is the right choice for Britain. That is the Labour choice.
That's what he said yesterday. It would be interesting if somebody had actually shown him some sort of economic forecast for Europe. That might have helped his speech a tad. John Longworth is with us. He's a former MEP, business consultant. You were pro-Brexit, John. What did you make, firstly, of what you heard Keir Starmer saying? Because he went all out for it there. There was a political reason why he said all of that.
Well, as you'd expect, I'm not very keen on his approach. They always say that doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different result is a definition of madness. Yeah. And it is madness to cast the country back into a divisive debate about getting close to the EU. It breaks the manifesto promises of Labour, and of course it will actually result in a diminution of the economy. Only 8% of UK businesses export to the EU, 2% export goods. But of course, the rest of the world is our oyster. You know, since the Australia deal, the amount of trade we've got with Australia has gone up by 14% already. Yeah. So the potential for Britain trading the world, as opposed to being stuck with the protectionist EU, is enormous.
It always strikes me, and I never tire of making this point, because you hear people like Starmer and those sort of evangelists over the EU, they talk about it as if it's a law of physics. And I just think, well, there's quite a lot of countries around the world that aren't in the EU, so they seem to rub along rather well. So it's a club, and, you know, in its initial form, common market and the like, there was elements that made a bit of sense, and those elements could continue. Of course, we can still trade with, you know, our nearest European partners. Nobody is saying we don't do that. But this idea that unless you're in this club, hell freezes over and the world ends almost. It's like an Armageddon moment.
Well, it's bonkers. You know, the biggest trading partners of the EU are not members of the EU, China and the United States.
Yeah, true.
We, as a country, have actually increased our trade with the EU since we left. We've actually increased our trade with the EU since we left. We've got a very good trade deal with the EU on the whole. There's absolutely no reason why we should burden the whole of the economy with the red tape that comes from Brussels. If we get close to the EU, all of British business will have to toe the line of Brussels red tape, even though only a small proportion of them actually deal with the EU.
It's rather extraordinary that I always thought, no, this is probably quite a sort of Thatchery point to make, but, you know, the whole aim of the progress of the civilised world is to kind of continually aspire, at least, to shrink the state. So states get smaller, bureaucracy where it can disappear should disappear, and, you know, we've become smaller in that sense. And of course, what was curious about the EU is that it managed to expand in a kind of almost Doctor Who fashion, as if some kind of invasion had happened. You know, what other system needs two parliaments? But they managed it. Couple of parliaments, president, currency, anthem. Looks a bit like a country to me. That's certainly what those that agitate for a more a stronger EU really want, isn't it? It's a United States of Europe. And I've never quite understood the thinking, because the arguments are false. The economic arguments are clearly false. So this is a sort of an innate desire that some people have. Keir Starmer feels more comfortable. He gets a better feeling in the pit of his belly at the thought of being in this club. What do you think, as somebody who is a Brexiteer, is going on there? You were in, you were an MEP, so you know what the coalface looks like.
Well, there's a level of weakness amongst politicians who can't stand alone and actually drive the country forward to better prosperity, independent decision making, you know, provide for our own security. It's a sort of need for stay close to nurse for fear of something worse. You know, we have to have the support of others. Why do we? If Britain actually is trading really well, business is doing well, the economy is growing and so on, we can stand alone perfectly well. The problem is, of course, that under this government that hasn't happened.
Yeah.
They've said that economic growth was the #1 priority, and they've actually hammered business left, right and centre. You know, I represent independent business network of family businesses. 85% of UK businesses fall into that category if you include sole traders. And they are really struggling because they've been taxed to the hilt. You know, they've got the new employment rights law coming in. So you've got a real problem if you've got a bad apple and you've employed them, you can't get rid of them very easily.
Sure.
All that stuff is really, really laying into businesses, and the economy is not growing. And you need economic growth as the first step to anything else that you want to do. If you can't afford it through economic growth, it cannot happen. NHS, education, all those things. As far as the EU as a state is concerned, I mean, it's bizarre that the president of the EU is not elected. The Parliament rubber stamps what the officials actually come up with. The officials initiate legislation, not the elected representatives in the European Parliament. So it is a very odd state. It's actually an autocratic, bureaucratic state.
When you watch those debates, and you've been in them, obviously, in Parliament, because I've made that argument to many kind of Remainers, and they've said, no, MEPs go there, they're elected, they debate stuff, and then the commissioners, sort of Peter Mandelson's the previous, as he had a job there, of course, doing this, one of his many, they then, apply it and kind of make it happen. So it is democratic.
It's not.
That's
really
not
like
quite
that in
true,
practice.
is it?
No, not at all. I mean, in the Parliament, there are two ways. Bizarrely, there are two ways in which you can vote. You can press a button on the desk, or you can put your hand up, and it varies according to the actual legislation that's being put through. But there's no debate at all. You get the leaders of the various groups tell the whole group what to vote, and they vote. And they whiz through 70 pieces of legislation in an hour, and there's no debate.
And before you know it, you voted for round televisions or something. I don't know, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, you voted to rename marmalade.
Yes, and that would be tragic, frankly.
Which is going to happen anyway.
For the Paddington Empire in particular. In terms of Starmer's economic kind of credentials, and this should worry anybody, and I'm not deliberately making a mischievous or a political point. To have almost no experience, in fact, I genuinely cannot see any business experience on the front bench.
Correct.
Is kind of almost criminal.
Well, it's a real problem for UK business that the lack of any understanding of economics and business in politics in general, but particularly in this government, is causing major issues. They wanted to get economic growth, said it was the #1 priority, but they don't know how to do it. It's not actually rocket science. If we lowered the cost of energy by drilling for oil and gas and fracking for gas, raised enormous amounts of tax, of course, from that, which could help public spending, and therefore other taxes wouldn't have to be introduced on businesses. If they could cut regulation to free up people from the red tape, if we could promote trade by removing the tariffs which increase the cost of living for everybody, all those sorts of things, very straightforward things, that would automatically stimulate the economy, and the winners would pick themselves. This government wants to pick winners by nationalising them. It's just the dead hand of the state, and it will actually lead to inflation, unemployment, and the lack of growth.
Yeah, and most people who are connected to business, even in the most obvious ways, would echo that, and they know all of this, but for some reason the government doesn't. Although yesterday, when Keir Starmer gave that speech, he did announce that British steel is set to be brought back into public ownership. I didn't quite know what to make of that. I thought, I never majored in steel, so I don't know lots about it. I know the Chinese love a bit of steel and they're all over it globally, but I was trying to work out the significance. So it's now going to be in public ownership. Your initial response, I saw you smile when I mentioned it.
Well, it's pretty straightforward. It's already in public ownership to all intents and purposes because the government's underpinning it with huge amounts of bailouts every single week.
Right. Yeah.
The only thing that bringing it into public ownership will do is make taxpayers in the UK pay for redundancy as opposed to the Chinese owners who would have been liable for it. Of course, the other irony is if Starmer gets his way and gets closer to the EU and has to abide by EU rules, he wouldn't be able to nationalise it because it would more than likely be illegal. as a state aid issue. So the EU would probably block it. So the very two things he was majoring on are contradictory in themselves.
That's interesting, isn't it? How powerful is British steel at the moment? I was born in Scunthorpe, so that's at the the epicentre of this story as well. And there's obviously been a lot of concern in that neck of the woods. I know it's not what it once was in terms of steel, as similar to other places, but nonetheless, it's still important. What's the status of steel, as it were? That might sound like a daft question.
No, it's not
on the ground. We live in a technological world where lots of things that used to be there and used and needed are no longer. Where is steel in that picture?
Well, we need specialist steel for sure. Steel that's actually produced in South Yorkshire, which is the sort of steel that's used for nuclear submarines, for example. And then we only have a limited number now of blast furnaces, so we do need to retain a level of steel production in the UK for strategic reasons, I believe. However, the way to do that is to cut the cost of energy. It's the energy costs that are forcing steel out to the UK, not the fact that it can't be productive in its own right. And that's entirely down to Mad Ed Miliband's policy on net zero, of course, where he's putting net zero above all else. Well, in actual fact, we could go 100% green. It would only reduce CO2 emissions by 1%.
Yeah, there is a kind of messianic or a god complex going on there. And I think he genuinely believes all this stuff.
Yes, imagine if he was Chancellor as well.
Well, imagine if he was Prime Minister. Because, I mean, that could happen. Just briefly, John, what is your take on the comings and goings of Downing Street? I mean, Keir Starmer's clearly on his way out at some point, but it could be months.
Well, it's such a shame that politics in the UK has now descended to be a soap opera, it appears. Will he go? Well, he's pretty self-righteous, and I said all along that he would be very stubborn, but it seems to me that the forces building up to remove Starmer seem to be, in the end, irresistible sooner or later. Probably sooner rather than later.
And is there any of those that are around as names that are being floated that make you as a businessman think, they're going to put it all right?
Well, I think the bond markets will probably answer that question, because the replacement for Starmer can really only be worse. Almost everybody's to the left of him, and more statist, more regulatory, more everything's got to be done through central government, and that is really bad for business.
Indeed. John, good to see you, sir. Thank you very much for coming in. John Longworth, you're back to Yorkshire.
Later on this week, back to North Yorkshire.
To God's own
country.
To God's own county, indeed. Listen, thank you to John Longworth, former MEP business consultant, with us on the programme. This is Talk.
The offer to be the voice of a sheep.
Yes, you can only dream, really.
Kelly Riley and Cole Hauser. Well, how much of Rip does your husband in real life have about him?
I mean, he's mad.
He's Kirsty and Phil.
Can we talk about one other thing?
We can talk about loads of things. It's an interview.
Wake up, it's a beautiful morning.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Paul says, if you vote for the party, not the person, why do we bother with who the leader is? Have an election, then vote for your leader, if that's the case. That way, you are genuinely voting for the party. Well, actually, it's more detailed than that, because you're actually voting for... You're voting for the party, but you're voting for your local representative, so whoever your MP is. Which is why once in a while you get those curious moments where a lefty will vote for a right-wing MP because they're a good constituency MP, so they'll vote on that basis. Yeah, it's a democracy. You can vote on whatever basis you want, of course. But you're not strictly voting for Keir Starmer unless you're in... What's his constituency? Holborn, isn't it, his constituency? So unless you're in there, then you're voting for Keir Starmer. So you're voting for the party and you're the representative. But I think in your head you just have the leader and who you want, don't you? John in Lincolnshire says we need a giant bar of that stain-removing soap to get rid of Keir, says John in Lincolnshire. It might take that in the end, to a big old shoehorn to get him out of there. We'll come to the voice of doom in a second. OK, have we got a winner on the voice of doom? Let's go to Michael in Birmingham firstly. What are you making of today's events, Michael? Chapter 17 of Keir Starmer and the curious case of the Prime Minister who's staying put.
Yeah, actually, I just want to pick up on a point you've literally just made about how you would vote.
Yeah.
My constituency in Brum is Jess Phillips' constituency.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so now she's resigned, and you know something? I think that she's dropped that like a red-hot stone, because for 6 or 8 months she said absolutely zilch. She hasn't said a single word, because she's paralysed, because snapping hard at her heels, 250 votes or whatever, is the Islamic pro-Gaza party, the second party in my area. And I would vote for them before I would vote for Jess Phillips. Seriously, I would. I seriously would. I seriously, because there's a few independent councillors around my area like that.
There were lots in your neck of the woods, Michael.
And I'll give them their due. They're good community councillors. If you go to them, they will do something. They will do something. And I will give them that. I don't agree with that side of the fence. You know, I'm not going to go down that route. And I've been on here before going mad about it. But, you know, I've gone down a bit of a Yardley constituency route there, which I didn't mean to. But I think Phillips has bailed on that one because she got a lot of criticism about the grooming gangs inquiry, because she wouldn't even call them that, because she's paralysed by where her constituency is. And I think she's glad to get rid. But the other thing I was going to say is about Keir Starmer. That I don't want him to go. I'm a reform man myself, a new reform man. And look, this guy's 100-seat majority for reform. Just keep him in there. Hope he doesn't do too much damage in the meantime. For me, position Z would be for Angela Rayner to take over. And, you know, I know Jess has called me a misogynist for saying that, but seriously, Ian, I would be ashamed of Britain if she was our PM. I mean, if you compare her to Kemi Badenoch, who's polished, qualified, articulate, and all of that, I mean, I can't imagine Angela Rayner at a serious...
Do you know what? And neither can I. There is a sort of word on the street at the moment that Angela Rayner has never actually wanted to be the Prime Minister. She wants to be in government and would probably like a tasty gig in government, but doesn't want to be the Prime Minister. Now, I don't know how true that is, but because there is this idea that her and Andy Burnham would be this kind of dream ticket thing.
Yeah, I mean, the only glimmer was, I think you played a soundbite earlier where she was quoted as saying, we've got to change because what we're doing isn't working.
Yeah.
And, you know, what these local elections have got to show, this idea that Labour and Starmer is terrible for this. He doesn't want to accommodate reform. He doesn't want to accommodate concerns about migration. Anybody concerned about migration is a right-wing bigot as far as he's concerned, and he will not change, and his Labour cronies won't change. And as long as we keep them in on that track, they're on a losing ticket, and they'll be gone.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yes, you're right. He doesn't like it, and he doesn't like, you know, various speakers that have been banned from coming over here to speak at on Saturday. Although, and I don't, again, that phrase, in fairness to Starmer, he doesn't make that decision. By the way, he 100%. I can tell he doesn't make that decision, but he'd be quite happy with it. That's for sure. Michael, thank you. Great call. Thank you for that. This one in from Reg, who says, I would imagine the whole of the country will be listening to PMQs tomorrow. Probably going to be the most entertaining bit of radio we've heard all year. Yeah, I forgot about that. That's going to be tomorrow. How is that going to go? How is Starmer going to even... I mean, wouldn't you just go throw a sickie, wouldn't you? Go, I'm sorry, I've got bad tummy today. Carl says, I like... I think I read this. I like Kemi, but she's dragging an anvil around with her, the Liberal Tory party. That will be that won't be lost on her in terms of what she does. John in Essex says, surely if Miliband gets picked as the next Prime Minister, then that's got to be a mandate for a general election, as he stood as leader in a general election before and lost. That's another one I'm reading for the second time, but happy to do so. This one from Carl in Derbyshire. Starmer will resign when Hermer allows him to. The Attorney General knows his odious agenda will be over if his useful idiot steps down. I slightly disagree on that, in that I think they're in it together. I think they genuinely thought that all that angst, whether it was about soldiers, whether it was about Chagos, they'd carried around for years, bloody British patriotism and all that, flags flying in distant parts of the country, soldiers that we sent out to do a task and then try to jail them when they do. All that stuff wrangles and they hate it. They hate that part of that whole... When the national anthem plays, you know, they would sit down rather than stand up. That group. I think when they got elected the other July, I reckon they thought, wow, we are, whoa, here we go, happy days. We can get all of this now sorted out and the whole country is behind us, except... they never were. There was no honeymoon period. There was no point when there was a sense that this is a revigorated Britain, and it hasn't really worked out, and it's about to get a whole lot worse. So who's going to take over? We'll come back to more of your calls in just a second. Jessica Elgott, who's a journalist at The Guardian, says that 103 backbenchers and PPSs have signed a statement saying there is no time for a leadership contest. The statement was organised by a group of backbenchers, many from the 2024 intake. So far, the number exceeds those calling for him to quit. Organisers say it's rising. So there's the other side. I did literally make that point about an hour or so ago, that he currently has more MPs that support him than don't support him. But look, if you've got 100 of your MPs that don't support you, you're in trouble. It doesn't matter if the rest do. You're in trouble. If you've got cabinet ministers that are telling you in your ear, advisory, not with any anger, saying, you know, we support you, Prime Minister, while you're here, but you need to think of an out. And then you've got ministers, Jess Phillips and others, today resigning. You've got a problem. 0344 499 1000. Back to the calls in just a sec. Let's do the voice of doom. So this is the voice we played you around about half an hour ago.
I simply don't know.
Who is that? These are some of the guesses. Rupert Lowe? No. Godfrey Bloom? No. Boris Johnson? No. Is it Stephen Kinnock? No. Paddy Ashdown? Ian Duncan Smith? No. Scooby-Doo? Yeah. No. Dominic Raab? No. Jonathan Ashworth? No. Michael Ellis? No. Dominic Raab? No. Jacob Rees-Mogg? No. Charles Hawtrey? No. But Chris in Chippenham says, the mystery voice sounds like a guest you had on earlier, Sir Jake Berry. And Chris, you are absolutely bang on. We've got a winner on day one. That's the first time that's happened, by the way. I promise you it wasn't deliberate, ish. But Sir Jake Berry was booked. He was on with us 5 minutes after he left. That was the mystery voice. Jake Berry was the right answer, which means we have a brand new one tomorrow right here on Talk. Let's go to Phil in Hull. What have you got, Phil? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Hi, yep.
Just a couple of things. Michael talking about Jess Phillips.
Yes.
Do you think it may have something to do with him imposing Harman over the top of her.
Yes, I mean, that would have been... Imagine turning... I bet she didn't get any call on that. She turned on the TV at the weekend and saw Harriet Harman being wheeled out into the garden of Downing Street as the new advisor on equality, women and girls. A job Jess Phillips already does.
This is the lady who couldn't tell you what a woman is, for a start. That's the first start. And then we get... I believe Rachel Reeves didn't go to the cabinet meeting today. And if not, could it be because Gordon Brown's been lobbed in over her head? Because I don't know who's advising Starmer, but they weren't looking up.
Do you know, I'd not even thought... How bizarre is this? You're absolutely bang on, Phil. It wasn't lost on me that Harriet Harman was being brought in to do a job that he already has a minister doing. But I hadn't really thought... Gordon Brown, I was thinking of it being a more kind of country, global thing, economic advisor. But, of course, he has a chancellor. And Gordon Brown used to be the Chancellor. I hadn't made the same comparison as to what Rachel Reeves might think of that.
I mean, the thing is, whoever's advising him about these things, I mean, Gordon Brown has got a marvellous track record, hasn't he? You know, about the gold and calling people bigots and bringing Mandelson back and, you know, really a credit to everybody. But Starmer himself, I just thought yesterday... It was absolutely pathetic. It just looked like he'd spent the weekend rustling up enough people who liked him to fill that room.
Do you think...
He came out with all this about Europe again, because that's his ultimate game. That's the game he's in. He wants to get back there because he's happiest when he's cuddling Macron and the world leader.
100%.
I mean, even going back to the trade deal with America... In all honesty, I think you or I could have got sent there and got the same deal, because all you've got to say is, hello, Mr. President, I'm from Great Britain and I think you're wonderful.
Yeah.
You know...
it's bizarre. I do wonder, though, and I'm now having to rethink everything, Phil, because up until about 10 minutes ago, I thought, well, Starmer's going to go. He's got to go. And now this piece, I know it's in The Guardian, but they're only reporting it, which is that you've got 103 backbenchers who are supporting Keir Starmer, saying we don't need a leadership contest. Bizarre as it sounds, could Starmer actually survive this?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Because one of the people that I thought might sneak in is Al Cairns. I think he's a Marine. I mean,
former
Army service and that. But I lost all respect for him when he managed to be not in Parliament when they were doing the legacy bill. And anybody who's ex-forces who's supporting that or not voting against it.
It's bizarre, isn't it? It's I don't know what he was thinking of. And the other one, in fact, Mark makes this point, two Labour MPs that he likes. One was Al Cairns and the other was Dan Jarvis as well.
Yeah,
the Barnsley
ex-soldier.
Yeah.
Another ex-soldier. And then there's that Mike Tapp. And he's just, I don't know, I think he's Starmer's best mate, to be honest.
You do wonder what happens to all of their lifelong experience when they suddenly get a job and say nothing about it.
I mean, we're talking all the time about who's taking over. And in all honesty, I voted Reform because I have no faith whatsoever in anybody on that front bench.
That's fair.
Not anybody. I mean, even Mahmood makes the right noises, but I ain't got a hope in hell of getting anything through that she says. And he's not bothered about that, Starmer.
No.
All he wants is his legacy. He likes the job, but he don't like doing it. You know, he likes the title, I'm the Prime Minister. Mm-hmm. And I just think, you look at that front bench and you think, blimey, my God, it's 7 follows 8. And you go through them all. I was a solicitor. Oh, I was this, I was that. And, you know, we've even got Polanski doing it now, haven't we? He must be catching.
Yeah, well, he's just making stuff up, isn't he? So.
Well, yeah, you know, now he don't pay his council tax, so they all
he'd forgotten he lives on a boat.
The bills. They all seem to have trouble paying bills, don't they, these politicians?
A lot of them as well. Listen, Phil, I've got to run, but brilliant call. I love the scepticism. It's healthy. A good disposition. Phil in Hull. Thank you to him. 0344 499 1000. More on the way from you. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000 2524. Let's just move to this story because I think it's very relevant as well amidst all the chaos. Charles III will deliver the King's speech tomorrow, detailing the government's legislative plans. Sir Keir Starmer's utter incompetence is set to intensify scrutiny over the speech as the economy, immigration and the environment are set to make appearances. Let's speak with Rupert Lowe, Talk's royal correspondent. Rupert, good afternoon to you. I mean, the King is Rupert Bell. I apologise. We were just talking about Rupert Lowe in the studio because somebody accidentally put that name in my head, and now Rupert, despite having known you for 500 years, I've renamed you. Listen, always good to have you with us, Rupert.
Is that a compliment, Ian? I'm not sure. But anyway.
No, it's always a compliment when we're talking with you, Rupert. You know that. Listen, the King's done a few of these before, even when the Queen was still alive. I think he did certainly one or two of them towards the end of her reign. So he's used to the pomp and the ceremony of it. How serious does a monarch take this? Do they see it only as ceremonial? Because they don't tend to write the speech. They just read out what's being written for them.
Yeah, and that is the point, because that is he as the King is doing his government's bidding, and that's the formal opening of a new session of Parliament. So it outlines the legislation for the coming session of Parliament. Well, when you think the last time the King gave a speech, it was comedy gold in front of the Congress, and he even made reference to the fact that there will be a member of Parliament secreted in Buckingham Palace, hold hostage until he's formally released back. I think he probably will be reading the government's bidding, but it will be a pretty turgid affair because it will no doubt be full of lot of word salad, I imagine, as they attempt to outline their policies for this coming session. But I have to say, when you think about it, I've never known us sort of coming into the formal opening of a Parliament session with such a frenetic, sort of chaotic backdrop. Because what we're probably going to see is legislation being put before Parliament, when probably it seems, and I'm only speculating here, that half of the Labour Party don't agree with what's being put forward. So it's going to be a very strange King's speech. So I don't think it'll be much on policy. It will be full of intentions, because if you look at what Keir Starmer said yesterday, there wasn't much new. So what's he going to be able to lay down? Because this will be signalling what he wants to happen over the next 12 months. So I think for the King, he's just going to be handed a piece of paper and told, you've got to read this, mate, or words to that effect, because he has no choice. So there won't be any times for his comedy gold that he showed so much of in the United States recently.
Yeah, I don't think there'd be much of that. Of course, the monarch and the Prime Minister have this weekly meeting. It's gone on for decades, this, I don't want to call it a tradition, but it's a formality, it's something they do. We don't really ever get to fully know. There's no minutes taken. It's a private conversation. Once in a while, the cameras are there to sort of witness the beginning bit or the end bit and a bit of small talk, but we don't see the details. Is that symbolic? Does the Prime Minister, do you sense, seek advice or counsel or vice versa? What do we know from the little we know, Rupert, happens in those moments?
Well, occasionally, and it was said that the Queen would sometimes have a quiet word with her Prime Minister. And bearing in mind she saw them from Winston Churchill right through to Liz Truss. And sadly, I don't think she had much time to really talk to Liz Truss, because obviously that was just a couple of days before she died. But the point of them is a sort of formal sort of meeting of the two heads of state, the Prime Minister meeting the King. Of course, we don't know what's going on, but it is a chance for the two to have a sort of discussion. So the King at least understands what's going on within his government. So I'm sure if he's having his latest meetings, he'll be saying, he might be saying, what the heck's going on? Because it does seem it's quite a bit, feels like a bit Wild West to us sort of looking out in at the moment with what's going on in the corridors of power.
Indeed.
So I think that's where the king can offer a steady hand on the tiller, because he showed, and let's be honest, with his appearance in the United States, that he was more than capable of offering that steady hand on the tiller and was able to smooth over the troubled waters with his personality. So for the king, look, he'll be all dressed up and he'll come along, he'll deliver his speech. I don't know how long it will be, but obviously it will be poured over. But I'm not expecting it to be full on detail, but more sort of intentions. Because let's be honest, and you probably know more about this than I, what can they put out there from a political point of view that won't ruffle half of his party's feathers?
Indeed. Just a point briefly, Rupert, on those meetings. I just wanted to come back to that. John Major once said in an interview, which I thought was brilliant, he said the meetings with the Queen were the most wonderful things in his diary. If for no other reason, it was the only time you got to talk to someone where you knew the conversation was never going to go any further. In Parliament, of course, even in the Cabinet, in corridors of Downing Street or Westminster, you always run that risk that someone's going to sing like a canary in the tea room or in the bar. But it was almost, he said, it was kind of like a counselling session, because you knew everything was private and it was never going to go elsewhere.
Yeah, well, and I think that's the important part of it. You know, the king doesn't go bleating, whereas, you know, we've got this cabinet meeting going on there. It seems like those canaries, there's a flock of them all over the place,
they're
chirping
everywhere.
away with every... Whereas if he is going to see the king, and presumably he might be going tonight to have a sort of word with him about the speech, you know, it may be a chance. And I think that is the point of it. It's a time when the head of state, i.e. the king, can talk to his prime minister, sort of, you know, in this case, man to man, and just quietly chew the cud over a cup of tea or whatever it is.
Indeed.
Maybe he'll, you know, what he can't change policy, because whatever is handed to him, it's not the king's place. It's there. He is there to do his government's bidding. And you have to remember that, whether we agree or disagree with it, that is the nature of our constitution. So it's significant from that point of view. But I know when the Queen, and towards the end, you know, the sort of policy speak nature of these speeches now, there's nothing, the detail is pretty thin on them. And I don't think that we'll see much more, you know, it'll be shallow tomorrow in terms of proposals, I think, because, as I say, Keir Starmer has got to get over this crisis at the moment if he wants to still be Prime Minister in a few months' time.
Indeed. I like the idea that there's a flock of canaries in the cabinet. It's a nice thought. If you look closely, there's also a cockatoo, but that's another story. Cockatoo, it's a bird, okay? It's just another bird. Listen, just a final question.
Comedy gold, though, Ian. Get your drift.
Final question, Rupert. Could the king technically stand up in Westminster tomorrow and think, I'm fed up with this, I'm dissolving Parliament? Could he do that? Constitutionally, I think he has the right. What stops him?
History. You know, we are a democracy, and the way our parliamentary system has evolved since, you know, basically Charles II and Oliver Cromwell, Parliament holds the sway. And so that's why when Parliament is going to be dissolved, that it's a formal process, because really the king is no more. I mean, he's a little bit more than that, but it's basically a rubber stamp process. So many people may want him to dissolve this current parliament, but it ain't going to happen. If it does happen, then wow. I don't know. I don't know what's happened to those cockatoos, because things have got a bit...
Yeah, the ostriches will be out next. Listen, Rupert, always good to talk. Thank you, Rupert Bell, Talks royal correspondent. How box office would that be if the king went, you know, I'm just done with all of this stuff. Just stop this whole nonsense. Keir, get out. Let's get somebody else sorted. Bring on the election. Wouldn't that be brilliant? And Camilla just quietly sniggering in the corner as he does so. I'd love that. Pav's in Harrow. What have you got for us? Pav, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Hi.
I won't labour the point which many other people have made about the fact that this guy makes the dead seem like they've got personality with his speeches and everything else.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I want to just briefly touch on is that I keep hearing this narrative across the board saying that this is a man of integrity, he's just not suited to politics. I mean, I'd just like to briefly push back against that. The idea that this guy is a man of integrity, I mean, just a cursory look at his last few years, specifically when he's been in Parliament. He did everything he possibly could to turn around and engage in, if I'm being charitable, seditious behaviour when he was regularly on the train to Europe, regularly asking for a second referendum and all the other stuff that went along with that.
Yeah.
You then had a situation where as soon as Corbyn was on the verge of being defenestrated, he did a complete volte-face and claimed actually he never wanted him to be Prime Minister. This despite various interviews suggesting that he was his close ally, friend, etc. You then have his tenure, you then have the situation during the lockdowns when, there was that wonderful thing that in September 2021 when he was calling for a circuit breaker lockdown, if you recall, that wonderful
the circuit breaker,
where approximately, I think it was 38 or 37% of people polled didn't even know who he was, which probably would have done us all a big favour. And then you move into his whole, his time as PM. Started off badly with the winter fuel allowance, with that awful budget. You then have pretty much every single person he's had around him, he has managed to sacrifice as a political pawn or whatever else you want in order to save his own job. A distinct lack of accountability. The Welsh First Minister, Elliot Morgan, went after the disastrous result, and yet all we got from him was, yes, we're listening, we need to go further and faster. I just wonder when these people talk about integrity, and by the way, I've even overgone the action that he took, against various journalists and everything when he was DPP head or in the last throes of that particular role. You then ask yourself, where is this idea of integrity coming from? If he is integrity or if he's a man of integrity, I hasten to think what a reprobate is, according to these same people. And that's the situation that I have. They're almost manufacturing a narrative for this guy, and I just don't think he warrants it. I mean, you could argue that a fair few of the recent prime ministers we've had have lacked integrity in various ways. But the idea that this guy is some honest guy who's just not suited to politics, I'm sorry, I find that deeply, deeply disturbing and frankly wide of the mark. And the last thing I wanted, or the additional point I want to make was you had a guest, I think it was Oscar Redrop earlier saying, and I heard this, people saying that the longer he holds on, potentially it may invoke sympathy or empathy or whatever you want to call it within the public. Well, may I offer you an alternative view? The longer he holds on, given his unpopularity, it will ensure that the Labour Party and the Labour brand becomes so much more toxic that almost it's gift wrapping Nigel Farage and Reform a majority for the next election, a majority which by current polls, generally speaking, they don't have. So I think that's a double-edged sword, whichever way it goes. And I think the problem, and I said this to you, in November before, we knew they were going to get elected. The biggest problem that I foresee with this man is, and I said this, on another radio station a couple of days ago, that, whichever, if you look at prime ministers over the last 200-300 years, whether you agree with them or not, they've all had, or most of them, have had some sort of direction of travel, some ideology. And you could argue, you can say, well, whatever, I don't agree with it or I do. But we've seen a direction of travel. My point to you, and you probably don't remember because it was a while ago, was that I didn't see what this guy's direction of travel was. And in amongst that was the fact that there was immediate alienation, because normally speaking within a party, especially Labour, you normally have like a group on your side. He clearly didn't have the centrists in Labour on his side. We've known for a long time that the far left in Labour haven't liked him. He's lost a lot of the old sort of Blairite wing. So who is this person turning around and relying on? And that's the problem. And I think if you twin that in with his arrogance, where he just thinks, and this is the last point I make, is I just think that he thinks he's like this paternalistic communist, where he thinks he needs to be there. That speech and some of the other stuff, without me, essentially saying, without me, there'll be chaos. Well, do yourself a favour, mate. You're the cause of the chaos. So if you remove yourself from that and extricate yourself away, surprise, surprise, you might not see it. But I just think that's the problem with the man. But I just wanted to make that point because I'm just sick and tired of this man of integrity, Robert.
No. He does believe that he is meant to rule, though. I mean, he believes it because he believes in his own brilliance. And that was probably, not helped by the fact that he did achieve, the very top job at the DPP. I get that, but, they've all got an ego, but I think his is quietly out of control, but becoming slightly more overt and obvious as the days go by. Listen, thank you very much indeed, Pav. Really appreciate that. Chuka Amuna there's a name from the past, has been seen going into number 10 within the last 15 minutes. He's no longer an MP, of course. He most recently was he was a Labour MP forever, wasn't he? And then did he drift over to the Lib Dems? Left the Commons in 2019. Good Lord. He was certainly part of one of those pacts, wasn't he? Of, was it the Brexit kind of stuff, I think? 2010 to 2019. So he did 9 years for Labour and then got fed up with things. But he's been seen going into number 2, another advisor. Maybe he's going to advise on home affairs. So Rachel will leg it because Gordon Brown's in the frame, even though not a politician. And then Mahmood will have to go as well because there's... I don't know. It's mental out there. Thank you to Dead as a Dodo and a gazillion others who pointed out, of course, there is no Prime Minister's Question Time tomorrow because it is the King's Speech. That came up earlier. Somebody mentioned it and I went with it for a bit. Yeah, you're right. There's no PMQs tomorrow on the day of the King's Speech. There is a great debate afterwards, though. So we will see and watch with interest. And, of course, Keir and Kemi will have to do that dual walk through the corridors from one house to the other. 0344 499 1000.
Offer to be the voice of a sheep.
Yes, you can only dream, really.
Kelly Riley and Cole Hauser. Well, how much of Rip does your husband in real life have about him?
I mean, yeah. I mean, he's mad. He's
Kirsty and Phil.
Can we talk about one other thing?
We can talk about loads of things. It's an interview.
Wake up, it's a beautiful morning.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is 5 to 4 on Talk. Let's get a word from Paul in Brighton. Paul, what have you got for us? Hi.
Yeah, hello, Ian.
Hello.
Yeah, you were talking to a gentleman earlier, and you were talking about other prime ministers. Always seem to have a mandate, but even if you agreed or disagreed with them, at least they had something you could cling. You could visualise that they had a purpose. But Starmer, his only purpose is his future. Yeah. I believe this prime minister's job. He's not up to it. He's not capable of it. It was just a stepping stone for him to go on the world stage, in my opinion. Hence why he spends all his time abroad, kissing and cuddling Macron and people. Yeah. It's just embarrassing. And I think that's all he's looking after.
Did you think that when he was on... Because this is the bit that confuses me, Paul. When he was in opposition, I used to think... I never rated anything he said, but I thought he kind of partly looked the part. Now he looks like a man out of depth. He looks scared. He doesn't look in control, and he's a terrible prime minister. I'm saying that objectively. But at one point, he kind of did seem to be the full package, ready to go.
I'm not sure I saw that myself, Ian, but certainly one of the most amusing sights I saw of him was when he was addressing Parliament about the Mandelson affair, and the opposite bench just burst out laughing. His face was classic. Yeah. It was almost like, really? Are you laughing at me?
Yeah. He couldn't quite cope with that, could he? Listen, Paul, I've got to run because Kevin O'Sullivan is just about to walk into this studio. Thank you very much indeed for that. Many of you pointing out... Chukaramuna, who's just gone into Downing Street for some reason. Stephen says he started the Remain party with Anna Soubry. There's another name from the past, although it's no joke, says it was part of the short-changed Change UK party. This was meant to sort of counter the Brexit party, and it had about 4 people running it. And as many people following it.
I wouldn't worry too much about Chucker. I mean, Starmer wasn't even there.
What was he doing there then?
Well, a pre-arranged meeting with some lowly serf or something, some lackey there. I mean, the whole... it's a shambles now. It's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, this Prime Minister, this stubborn little man, is telling us, oh, well, if I have to go, the country will be plunged into chaos. We are plunged into chaos already, because he won't go.
Yeah.
It is... down to him.
Correct.
The chaos we are suffering is purely down to his bizarre stubbornness. Yeah. I think deep down there's a little part of him that still thinks he can survive.
I think there is. I genuinely think there is.
But he can't. I just bumped into the great Trevor Kavanagh in the foyer of this building of Talk